Well, as I always say, it's a fantastic one, and that's classic. And today, I would also say it's an interesting one. We have today two women that wrote a book, and it's about an actor, a very famous actor, Bob Crane, who most people will know as, Colonel Hogan from Hogan's Heroes. But there's quite a story behind that, and the two of them have gone in depth, and I mean very in depth on Bob Crane's life. And I can tell you that I did read the entire book, and it is quite extensive. It's actually about 700 pages. So, anyway, I'd like to introduce Carol Ford and Linda Groundwater, and they wrote Bob Crane, the definitive biography. So, welcome to That's Classic.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much, John.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys are here. So, right out of the gates, I want to talk about Hogan's Heroes because that's, like I said, I think most people are like, wow, that's cool. I don't know that much. One of the things that I saw in the book that I was intrigued by was the screen test for Bob and that he was with Werner Klemperer. But it sounded too like they both had like a kind of their own version of like what they thought the role was going to be. What can you tell us about that? Who would like to start?
I'll let Carol start that one. That's her favorite story.
Okay, sure.
So Bob Crane was he was just coming out of radio. So he was still working in radio. He had been on the Donna Reed Show. Bob didn't have a whole lot of acting experience. And so when Bob was looking to further his career in acting, he was getting his feet wet on the Dick Van Dyke Show and on some other, he had some other guest starring roles, but then he hits the Donna Reed Show and he becomes a semi-regular.
Yeah.
Throughout the run of the 2 years that he was on the Donna Reed Show, he became what he called very bored. He wanted something that was a little bit more what he called, different. He used the word swingy, but he didn't mean that in a sense as maybe we would use it today, but it's just something
Right.
different. And he left the Donna Reed Show of his own accord, amicably, no, you know, problems as far as him stomping off or him being fired. He just said, I would like to move on to other things.
Hmm.
And right away, he started to get, offers for other things like Please Don't Eat the Daisies and My Mother the Car, which he turned down because he didn't want to get right back into that same kind of, framework of what a sitcom was. But
Like a
then,
family, like
like
I took from your book too
right.
that it was more like he didn't want these family man
That's
vibes.
right. He's like, I've got that at home. I want to go do something different. I want to go do
Right.
something that's really different and pushing the envelope. And so the idea of a sitcom in World War II in Nazi Germany was presented to him. He wasn't really sure about that. He was like, I don't know, a comedy about the war. And you got to remember, 1964, we're talking not even a full 20 years since World War II ended.
Sure.
So to put it into perspective, think of like 9/11. So, it would be like us doing something along those lines where there is still very sensitive feelings. There are still a lot of veterans who had been through
Hmm.
the war and so forth, and a lot of families who had suffered because of the war. But what he did was he insisted that there was a pilot that would be sent out to the veterans who would review it and listen to it and watch it and give their feedback on it.
Before we go on with the interview, I just wanted to remind you to please subscribe to That's Classic if you haven't already, and hit the notification bell so that you'll know when my next episode is being released. Okay, let's go on with the interview.
When Bob did his screen test with Werner Klemperer, Bob brings with him this extensive career in radio. He brings with him the Donna Reed Show. He brings with him this glib, hip sense of, I'm just going to wing it kind of thing. Even though he
Hmm.
worked very hard, he brought this very campy type of character to Hogan. And when he and Werner Klemperer came together for that screen test, Werner Klemperer is very staunch and very straight and very, serious. He did what they would call the heavies,
Hmm.
Judgment at Nuremberg and those types of films. So he's not a comedic actor. And so he's coming to it as this, you know, German, Austrian heritage who is now got this other guy who's coming at it and bouncing off. And they just clicked. And when we talked to the producer Al Ruddy and creator Al Ruddy, he said it was just magic. It just clicked. And they knew right away. Richard Dawson had been considered for the role, and he ends up taking the role of Newkirk. It was there were all of these rumors that were going around where, oh, Richard Dawson was so mad because he didn't get the leading role. And
Hmm.
but even he said if he had been cast in that leading role, it would have lasted 3 episodes. It wouldn't have made it because you had this brash American, type of character, and that's what Bob Crane was, up against this old school German, Prussian,
Yeah,
Luftwaffe crew,
totally.
and they gelled. And that's where that magic really was born. And it grew from around that. And you have John Banner then being brought on as Sergeant Schulz, and all of the characters that as they come on, they become part of this magic because even today people will say, oh, if we were to redo Hogan's Heroes, who would do what? And it wouldn't work. You can't mess with that perfection because it really was perfect casting. It was as perfect as you could get in casting a series.
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing too, which I related to in the book is that you mentioned that John Banner, he steals every scene. I mean,
Yeah,
he
he
doesn't have to
does.
do much of anything. He
Yeah,
literally
no.
can
Yeah.
be off to the
He
side
was.
and he steals every scene. And I felt like the cast actually pretty much, you know, said that's true.
Yes.
It
Yep.
is true. Yeah, it is true. And he's
Yeah.
also one of the largest
Yeah.
things on the screen. So
Yeah.
It's
whether he
hard to
said
upstage
anything or
him.
not, you were going to see him.
Yeah, you're gonna know. And then you've got Robert Clary who's playing LeBeau, and
Mhm.
what's wild is, and some people may know, some people may not, that he was a Holocaust survivor, and here he
Yes.
is, you
Yes.
know, playing a POW. I mean, it's really so intertwined. It's pretty wild.
And his,
Most,
go ahead.
sorry, go on.
No, no, go ahead.
I was just saying, many of the actors who played Germans had direct connections to the war, and many of them fled Germany, Austria, was it Liechtenstein,
Hmm.
to get away from the Nazis. Werner Klemperer's family, Leon Askin's family, John Banner's, Cindy Lynn, all of those people had connections to the war in Europe. And they would, if you watch carefully, when you were mentioning LeBeau, if you watch carefully, every time they did a Hitler salute or they were fiddling around with that, he'd either have his fingers crossed like this, or he'd have his hand behind his back, or
Yeah.
he'd be using the other arm. And if you notice carefully, even if he's wearing something with short sleeves, you'll notice he always has something over his arm, and that was to hide his tattoo
Oh, how
from,
interesting.
Hmm.
yeah.
Hmm.
So, I mean, he lost most of his family in the war. And
Hmm.
the only
Yes.
reason he survived, in his own book, he says the only reason he survived was when he was a small child or young child, and he was taken. His mother has said before they were separated, do whatever they tell you. And that was the last time he saw her. And what he would do was, I think it was on, sorry, my dog just scared herself.
I don't worry
I
about it.
think it was I think it was Sundays. He would go and sing and dance for the
Hmm.
Nazis, and that is how he stayed alive. They
Wow.
kept him because they didn't have a lot of use for children, particularly, small statured, not very strong. It was more, simpler for them to just kill them, but they kept
Hmm.
him because he entertained them. But he obviously never forgot that was
Yeah.
what he had to go through. But he said, "Look, Hogan's Heroes, it's a job."
Yeah.
And he was happy to do it and happy to make fun of those people because it's one
Hmm.
of the ways that people get over those things, as in you don't really ever get over it, but you deal with it. And one of the ways to deal with it for him was to throw it back in their faces.
Hmm.
But you
Yeah.
will notice, if you watch him carefully, there are times where you will notice that he's clearly not doing certain things because
He just
um,
can't.
He just
He
can't.
can't. Yeah.
How interesting. How interesting. I've got to take another look. I mean, I've got it all on DVD. I love Hogan's Heroes. So that's interesting. I'll tell you a little side story, by the way, about Robert Clary. But 2 months before he passed, because he's only passed within the last year or so,
Mhm.
I actually was able to contact him. And I reached out, I got him on the phone, and it was honestly kind of sad, to be quite honest with you. I reached him and I told him what my show was and that, it would mean so much to my subscribers who love classic television. And he literally said to me, he said, Nobody cares anymore about that. Nobody cares anymore about Hogan's Heroes. Nobody's interested anymore in that." And I said
That's
to him, I
so
said,
sad.
it was real sad. And
Yeah.
I told him, I
That's
said,
very sad.
yeah,
Because
I
it's
said,
not
Because
true.
it's
I
not
It's
know.
still on the
true.
air every day.
And
I,
you
I
know,
know how much it's
yeah.
not true. And I told him that. I said, Robert, I'm coming to you. I'm not this isn't me trying to market anything. I'm just telling you, people love your show. They love your character. Hogan's Heroes means so much to people. People are laughing every day from this show.
Yes.
And
It's
he
true.
said, no, no, they don't care. No one wants to hear from me. And he was like, I have to go. And he got up. He was
Oh,
just very, and who knows where he was at, where his headspace was
yeah.
at. But
Well,
it was
Yeah.
very sad. It was
I'll,
very
I'll, I'll tell you a very short side anecdote to that. Um, After he passed, and this is no judgment on his family because when people pass away, you have to unload,
Oh, of course,
things
of
in
course.
the house and whatnot. And so
Yeah.
um, he had a lot of his Hogan's Heroes items that went up for auction.
Oh,
And a lot,
wow.
not just Hogan's Heroes, but a lot like his records and his diaries and so forth.
Oh,
And
I didn't
so
even know that. Wow.
yeah, the
Hi, this is John from That's Classic. I just wanted to remind you, if you want to become a member of That's Classic, you just hit the join button in the corner of the video. For $3.99, you get a personal shout out from me on my next episode. You also get my episodes released early to you, and you get a members only live chat with me, which is in addition to the normal subscriber live chats. So these live chats we get in much more in depth. It's really fun. It's a much more intimate conversation, and it's just been a blast so far. So anyway, if you get a shot, hit the join button and become a member. I want to also do a shout out to Oscar, Crooks, Deb, Brad. Thank you so much for coming on board. Dina, Michael, Ruthie, Janice, Gail, and Ken. And Gail, thank you so much for your suggestions. They were awesome. And Ken, yours as well. Working on it. Here we go.
we're connected with the Liberty Aviation Museum in Port Clinton, Ohio, and they have a large portion of the uniforms that they have. Hogan's uniform. I call them uniforms even though they're technically costumes, but we
Mhm.
watch the show and
Yeah,
we look at
yeah,
them as uniforms. But
sure.
they have Hogan's uniform, Klink's uniform, Schultz's uniform. They
Ah,
have,
love to see
yeah,
that.
The
they
coffee
have
pot
the
and the
coffee pot.
bathrobe.
The
Oh,
bath one,
come
Clink's
on.
bathrobes, the gold one where it gets splashed in the face. But what the CEO of the Liberty Aviation Museum and their staff, all of the staff, are tremendous Hogan's Heroes fans, and we go out there. We try to make it out every year. I couldn't go out this year just because of my personal schedule, but every year just about I go out. And we're very closely connected, and they have now because he watches for all of these things, whether it's
Yeah.
whatever auction houses are going up, and these were all up on eBay. And
Oh,
he had got
no.
oh yeah, he got Robert Clary's Hogan's Heroes scrapbook, which is like this thick.
Wow.
I saw it last summer or last fall when I was out there.
What was in
And
there?
it's and to say too, Bob Crane also kept scrapbooks. He had two leather-bound scrapbooks. He kept
Understatement.
everything. Yeah,
Yeah,
he
it
kept
literally sounds like he
Understatement.
everything.
kept
Understatement.
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Robert Clary's is actually now with the Bob's is still with his family, but Robert Clary's because it went through auction the Liberty Aviation Museum acquired it, and so it's now with the collection. And so it was very similar to Bob's in that it had like the Nielsen ratings clippings, and it had
Wow.
all of the articles, and it had magazine articles, and it had, the caricatures, and it had, it had photographs, it had, pretty much anything and everything that if you were a part of something and it was
Wow.
being, printed and promoted and, all of those things. And honestly, his was easily this thick,
Wow.
just bursting at the seams. And it was a joy to look through. It was fascinating to look through. And I'm glad that the museum has it because they will take care of it and preserve it. Um,
Oh, but
but
all
yeah,
that other
that's
stuff was on eBay. I
all of
had
it was on
no
eBay.
idea.
Yeah.
I would have been
Hmm.
checking that out
There,
myself
it's
because
some
I'd
of
be
it
like,
may
come on.
still be on there
Wow.
that just didn't move, that they're just, trying to, unload, and maybe they need the money for who knows what. Maybe other people are in the family are ill and, they want to
Yeah,
say,
no idea.
you
Yeah,
don't
no
know.
judgment there. It's just that, oh, I can't
Yeah,
believe it's out there.
it's very sad when you said, and then we'll move on, but it's just sad to me that you say that he thought towards the end of his life that nobody cared
He
because,
literally
and
told me that. He told me that right over the phone.
that
He said nobody cares about this anymore. Nobody
no,
cares.
that couldn't.
Nobody wants to hear about Hogan's Heroes. I'm like,
Oh
no, no,
gosh,
trust me,
no.
no.
That
Couldn't be
couldn't be
further
further
from the
from the
truth.
truth.
Oh,
And
please.
and when
Bigger
I
maybe now than it was then, you know?
Yeah.
there is such a huge fan following. And when I go to, and Linda too, we go and we give presentations to primarily Hogan's Heroes fans. They come to
Sure.
hear the Hogan's Heroes bits, and then we tell them all about Bob Crane too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But the and the thing that gets me are the kids, the 9, 10, 11 year olds who are just that I've seen kids come to the Liberty Aviation Museum and stand there in awe looking at the display behind glass. And the CEO there is so very, he's a big kid himself. And so he'll let some of the pieces out so that people can touch them and feel them. And
Oh, wow.
when you see the fans, because I'll tell you right now, back in 1985, if the Liberty Aviation Museum existed and that collection was there, I would be a nightmare to my parents saying,
Oh
we
my
must
gosh.
go
Oh
to
my gosh.
Ohio. And I
You
can hear
got
my
it.
dad say, what do you want to go to Ohio for? I'm like, no, we must go to Ohio because it's brilliant. And
Wow.
I see the fans' faces light up, and I hope that, I hope now wherever Robert Clary is, he can see that from where he is because it couldn't be further from the truth. The
I agree.
fans love the show and they
Oh
love
yeah.
his character. They love him. He's he's cuddly. They love him.
Oh, he was, and I tried to tell him that. I really tried so
Yeah.
hard. And I am not the most
Yeah.
intense guy. I mean, I was telling him real nicely on the phone. I wasn't,
You
I was
will
like,
be
listen,
interviewed.
yeah, I was like, even if you don't come on my show, you really need to know how much
Oh,
your show
Oh.
means to everyone. But he
I
just
tell you what,
wasn't
though,
there.
it took us 5 years to get
yeah.
him to agree to say anything to
Wow.
us.
Wow.
And
Anything. And
to that goes back to
Arlene
like, oh,
Martell, who played
yeah.
Tiger, went to him after. She was one of the first people to say yes to us. What she was, I think, the first audio interview we did aside from Ed Beck because his was all on
Mhm.
cassette. But she was the first one to sit down on the phone with us and just talk. And I said to her, you know, she said, who else have you spoken to in the cast? And I said, well, we went to Robert Clary, and he said no. And she said, oh, Bobby said no. And we said, yeah. And I couldn't think of him as Bobby, but that's
No, I
okay.
can't picture. I can't
No,
either. I know.
Bobby said no. And so she said, I'm going to get in touch with him. So now,
Wow.
mind you, he lived around the corner from Richard Dawson for many, many years, and they never spoke
Wow.
because Richard Dawson, I think, was also kind of reclusive in that
Mhm.
way. But for some reason, these two men never connected, and they were, I think, literally around the corner from each other.
Oh my gosh.
So Arlene said, I'm going to go to Bobby and I'm going to see if he'll. I'm going to tell him that you girls are okay because you have to remember that we were nobody out of nowhere, and so he and this other movie book thing had come out just recently to that, and everyone had felt burned by that. But they didn't realize that we were not those people. We
Right.
were going to tell a very different story. And so she said, no, no, I'm going to go to Bobby. So she came back to me by email. I won't tell you what she said out of respect for both of them in their passing. But she said, well, first of all, I called and said, hi, Bobby, this is Arlene. And he said, Robert, thank you.
Oh, wow.
And she said, oh my, okay. And then they had their conversation and he said no, and he didn't want to tell, and he did, and then there was this gossip, and she said, no, no, it's not like that. And so we continued our work because we took 12 years to put this book together, which is
I
why
believe
every,
it, by the way. I mean,
yeah,
it is
it's
so
huge.
extensive. I mean, literally, I'm not trying, like, this isn't just to plug the book, but literally, if you want to know about Bob Crane, I don't know what else you could possibly not know after reading this book. You have so many different people that have, quoted, that, that have added to it, all of these different angles. Please, I believe it was 12 years. I was thinking
Yeah,
that. It's so
it
funny.
took us 12 years to do that.
Yeah.
And when as our list got longer, I would then send another list and say, these are the people we've now spoken to. You've got Jerry London, you've got Bruce Bilson, we've spoken to Al Ruddy, we've spoken to, Robert Butler, we have this person, we have that person, please, please, please. And so eventually he wrote us a letter, which I'm actually very grateful to have because now I have a physical
Yeah,
thing from
I
him.
agree. Rather than an
Um,
email. I like it.
and he loved his work. He loved his work on the
He
show, and
did.
he loved everybody on the show. And he had, they were all very respectful of each other, and it
Hmm.
was a family set. But it took him a long, long time. It took him a long, long time to even come to that point of, I'm going to say one thing,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
know, I'm going to say, and in regards to, and when he talked about, the elephant in the room, he said, what's good for the goose is not good for the gander, and anyway, who cares?
Hmm.
And I thought, aren't you a brilliant man? He had some very funny things to say. He talked about how, Bob was a very conservative Republican,
Oh,
whereas most
interesting. I don't.
actors are
Yeah.
not.
Right. Right. You're right.
Certainly in those days,
Yeah.
they were not. And he said, Bob, your argument is not going to get any better just because you raise your voice to a pitch, that only dogs can hear. So they would have, they were able to talk and they were able to respect each other and enjoy each other. But it did take a long time for him to come to the party, even in that small way, even then. And that was, 20 years ago
20 years ago.
when
Yep.
the show was still, I mean, still very popular, just as it is still. It's run every single day since I noticed it here in 2003. Has not been off the air for a single day.
Yeah.
And I mean, the show is 50 years old, 60 years old.
60. Yep.
60 years old this year and still going. And and just quickly to sidetrack, when you said that this book is a little of everything. Bob's kids, when they want to know where dad was on a certain day or doing a certain thing, they say, let me go get the Bible. And they pull out our book.
Yep.
I
And
believe it, by the way. I
yeah,
do. I
let me
really
just see if dad did this. We'll go pull out the Bible. And that is not to, and it is important for us to say, because at some point people will say, the family wanted you to do this. You've only shown them what the family want.
do.
We are considered Bob's official biographers because we are endorsed by Bob's estate.
Hmm.
However, all of that happened after.
Hmm.
We went to them and said, would you like to be involved? Would you like to give us information? Would you like to sit down for an interview? Some did, some did not. But there was no endorsement or support until after the book was published. So that's important for us to say because people think that what's in the book is hiding bad things or, you've
Hmm.
only put in the good stuff and, you're
Right.
biased. Well, we are biased, but we're biased toward truth. My
Hmm.
background is that I'm a journalist. I was a reporter. I'm not now, but that's what I was in a prior life.
Yeah.
And I had zero interest in looking for a little angel. There's no story in that.
Hmm.
But what we found was that there was a lot of misinformation out there
Yeah. Oh,
about
yeah.
the show and about Bob. And so we then ended up, starting with a book like this that became a book like, that
Yeah. Yeah.
because there was so much that was wrong or misunderstood
Hmm.
or just plain ignored, that we said we've got to keep going. So that's why we ended up with, over 200 interviews and over 1,000 documents and digging into the National Guard and every high school person, every work person, everyone that ever encountered him was, hey, come and tell me a story. And if they had something, we didn't shy away from any of the controversial aspects of the
Hmm.
show or of Bob. But the people that we spoke to were so relieved to have somebody who just wanted to hear the truth that they would tell us everything. And if there was
Yeah.
something bad, then we would include it. And if there wasn't anything bad, then there wasn't anything bad. The consensus is that the show was a delight to work on, that there were some occasional issues, but nothing that um, I we had one story, and I'm still waiting for backup on it, and I think we included it in the book, but most people's responses were,
About
no, I didn't
90,
see
about
anything like that.
98% were
Yeah,
positive.
no, I
And
didn't see anything
as you
like that.
saw,
Yeah,
or and John, when you read the book, it there was no sugarcoating anything. We
no.
No.
included what we
No.
had. And also the book is also so big and in depth because a lot of times when there was an inaccuracy, we had to say what the inaccuracy was
Right.
and
Mm,
then produce the truth. And
Hmm.
it's not just, oh, he said, she said. It's this was the inaccuracy that got picked up from who knows where, reporter got
Hmm.
something wrong or whatever. But here are the 30 people that said, nope, 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 nope. And you have to include that. And, sometimes
mm,
Right.
people don't understand that. I am a managing editor and a director of the department of the editorial services department for a healthcare publishing firm. And so we
Mhm.
are publishing healthcare literature that
Right.
is evidence-based. And so if you don't have the evidence to back up your claim, then the claim is it's null and
It's
void
hearsay.
because
Yeah.
it's hearsay.
mhm,
That's exactly right. And
Yeah.
so by having the many people say, all of the things that they said, and it was predominantly good with the caveat that yes, he did have this other piece of his life that
Right.
was destructive, that was what some people call the dark side, what some people say, was, not, something that they liked about him, but most 98%, 97% were saying, despite that, that did not make him a bad person. It meant
mhm.
he had issues. It meant he had a
Issues.
problem, but he was not this, as his cousin Jim Senich used to say, or that he told us, was that he didn't have horns sticking out of his head. He wasn't,
Right.
he wasn't a saint, but he wasn't the devil either. He was human.
Right.
He was a human
Mhm,
being. And so that's
mhm.
where the depth of that book really comes in. And if you're looking for salacious gossip and every other page is, you know,
We got some books we
naughty
can lead you
stuff and,
to. Yeah.
today is Debbie and tomorrow, is Michelle and and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
That's not what this book was about.
I don't think
Um,
that's what the book's about. But I do want to
but
say
that's
this
what
because,
people expect when they see a
well,
Bob Crane book.
I
They
think
want the
they
Yeah.
down and dirty.
I think they do, but I will say this about the book. Yes, it's not like scandal, but what I do like about it is you don't allude from that scandal. You actually do, for people that are listening to this right now, I just want to make clear, yes, there's a lot of great stuff and a lot of positive stuff related to Bob Crane that's in there, and by all means, but they do not avoid how he died, how things
Oh
happened in
God,
the
you
hotel
can't.
room.
Yeah.
They don't, they're not trying to sugarcoat any of that, and they do go there. So I want to make that really clear that there was a lot of positivity, but they also got into that. So it's not, there's no avoidance in this.
And we were very, very specific in how we were going to present Bob, that part of Bob's life, because that part of Bob's life, and and you probably, as you read through it, you maybe picked up on this, but that part of Bob's life weaves throughout his whole life from a very
Yeah.
early age. And
Yep.
so we did not want that to take away from what we were explaining was happening in his life, whether it be his family,
Right.
his career, his, whatever it was. That's all up here. And
Mhm.
then, we get to a point and then we break and then we say, okay, now we're going to talk about this other side. Now we're going to talk about the addiction, which he
Totally.
came to understand as an addiction. And we're going to segregate that over here because that can't, it'll distract the reader
It would have
from the
taken
other
over.
important pieces
Yeah, it
of
would have
his
taken
life.
over the book because it weaved through his life from the 50s.
Right.
And you can't take a 30-year addiction or a 30-year habit that became an
Mhm.
addiction and put it in every single bit of the book. We've had people criticize us for not doing that, but if all I'm doing is focusing on what part of his addiction or habit was in control at this time, you'd never hear the story.
No,
You
I
wouldn't hear
agree.
about Hogan's Heroes. You wouldn't hear about how they, one of my favorite things, Hogan's Heroes stories came from Cynthia Lynn. I love Cynthia Lynn. God rest her soul. She was a lovely lady. We talked with her for what, 2 or 3 hours. I think she's
She
just a
played
delightful
Clink's
woman.
secretary, right?
The first
Yeah,
one,
the first
Yeah.
yes.
secretary, Helga. He married
Yeah.
the second one,
Right.
but
But
the
he had an
first
affair
one,
with Cynthia. Yeah.
yeah, he had
Yeah.
a nice long affair with her, and she tells stories about how they, first went out to promote the show and the things that they had to do, and the little song and dance type things that they had to do to promote the show as it began, and how they had to, for us now, it's quite simple to say this is a POW camp, but back then there was a huge miscommunication, as in really a misperception more, that you can't make fun of this a concentration camp. And we thought, my God, no, it's not a concentration camp. It's a POW camp. And we have sat down and we have spoken with POWs and we have
Hmm.
said to them, what do you think of this? That was Bob's insistence. Bob's family was directly impacted by the war, and said, is this, what do you think? And they said, well, if we didn't laugh, we wouldn't have survived.
Right.
And so but in those days, there was still this muddle between a concentration camp and a POW camp.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
But if people who were in concentration camps and who were fleeing concentration camps could see this show for what it was, then why can't the rest of us?
Right. Right.
But her stories of how that show began, because of course she was
What did
there
she
in the
say?
beginning.
Tell us one of them. What did she tell you?
Oh, just that
I got one.
I just keep
Yeah.
thinking
So,
about my own fruit.
well, so there's a couple.
Go ahead.
So the one that Linda's laughing about now is
I have
when
my
they
own
were
fruit, thank
doing
you.
the it was like a cast party, and it was in Palm Springs, and I'm blanking on the name of the hotel, but it was a big hotel
Mhm.
in Palm Springs, and they had it all decked out like Stalag 13,
Yeah.
and they all went in uniform and did the whole thing, and Bob and Cynthia Lynn were on the cusp of having an affair. They were either very early into it or
They
just
weren't
about to
there
start.
yet. No, they
And
weren't there
he
yet.
he
Mm.
comes to her hotel room and
No,
says,
he called her. He
he
called
called,
her.
yes, he calls and he
He called
says,
her. I have fruit.
I have fruit. And she was being coy and she says, I'll eat my own fruit. And so, so
I
there's
have my
this
own
little, and the
fruit,
way she
thank
tells
you.
it, the way she told us, she was so soft spoken and so sweet and so lovely, and she adored Bob Crane. She absolutely loved him, and she regretted that she left the show. She said it was one of the biggest mistakes of her life.
And didn't she
People
leave?
think,
Was it because her husband said
yes,
you need to leave the
Yes,
show?
yes,
her husband was a gambler and a drunk,
Hmm.
and that was, unfortunate. But her husband was a gambler and a drunk, and they were having issues, and he was
they
spending
were
away their
separated. Yeah.
life, and she had an affair with Bob, and he could not stand seeing them on screen. She said, "Fine, I'm going to try and make my marriage work." And he
Uh,
said, "If you want to make this marriage work, you have to leave the show." And she said, "What?" And he said, "I can't stand seeing you on screen together." Um, and
She broke her contract
she left. So she broke her contract and she left. And a couple of days after that, Bob actually appeared, remember, in her yard.
in her yard
She
by her
right. By
window.
the
just
window.
by the window, and she just shoot him off and he left. But within 2 or 3 weeks, it was clear to her that her marriage was not going to work, and so she decided to break up with her husband, and she went to back to the show and said, "I would love my job back." And they said, "Yesterday we hired Sigrid Valdis."
Yeah. Yeah.
And that changed everything for everyone. That changed all three of their lives.
Yep.
Bob ended up marrying Sigrid. They allowed Cindy to come back as often as they could and people sometimes think that's funny because you will see, I think, once or twice, um, Arlene Martell appears as someone other than Tiger, which when you watch the show like we watch now, you just go, what is going on?
Yeah, I do
And the
wonder that.
same thing
Yeah.
with yeah, and the same thing with Cynthia Lynn. Once or twice, you'd see her as, a different character. But in those days, there was no let me binge watch this today, all
Right.
6 seasons all at once. Now, it was a little different with Cynthia because she was there for an entire season on a fairly regular basis. But if you didn't see that season or didn't see her all the time, later
Yeah.
on, you might not connect her. But they brought her back when they could.
Hmm.
But there was another actress in her place at that point, and Bob did get in touch with her, or she did get in. Which way was it, Carol? Right before Bob passed, was it he got in touch with her?
Yes.
She got in touch with him.
Yep.
And the other one didn't. They didn't end up
They didn't
connecting. And the
connect.
next time she heard he had passed, like she tried to connect with him a couple months
Hmm.
before he passed, and he just never got a chance to get back to her or chose not to. I don't know what, we'll never know why. And then she heard that he was killed, and it just broke her heart because she had said, if we were together, it would have been different. It would have
Oh,
been
wow.
different.
Wow.
And she loved Bob's kids. She loved Bob's kids, but of course she could never say, she ran into, I think, Karen at one point,
Aaron.
and they had a nice chat, and she
Yeah.
couldn't say, well, I had an affair with your dad. Um,
Yeah.
but she very much loved Bob. But to do the right thing for her family, she
She tried
left,
to make
and
it work.
that turned
Mhm.
out to be a big mistake for her. And who knows what would have happened if she had gone back,
Yeah.
if
I
she had
mean, it
been
would
able
be
to
a
go back.
totally different story. Yeah. Who
Yeah,
knows?
Mhm.
yeah.
Or
But
not. We don't know.
but
Yeah,
Yeah.
we
they,
don't know.
yeah.
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 And no one will, and there's all those what ifs,
Yeah.
And you
I
and
know.
can't do that. You
it
can't
could
go
be,
down that
yeah.
rabbit
Nope.
hole.
You got to
Yeah.
go. Now let's
But
talk a
they
little
used
bit
to do
about.
skits and all sorts of things to try and make people understand what the show was about and to showcase the talent of the people who were going to be in this show. And the CBS decided that they were going to put this grand saying that Bob despised. If you liked World War II, you'll love Hogan's Heroes. And everybody just went, "What's wrong
Oh,
with you?"
Right.
You know?
Exactly. I
Stan
remember that.
Freeberg. Stan Freeberg came
Yeah.
out with that.
Who could say that you
Mhm.
liked World War II?
Oh,
And if you liked World War II, you're going to
You'll love,
love Hogan's Heroes.
yeah,
They didn't
right.
say that
bad
Right.
about Mikhail
marketing.
Stevey. They didn't say that about Sergeant Bilko. You don't have to say you loved World War II in order to
Oh,
make this show into a
Mhm.
good thing. And there were people who said, you're just making fun of the Nazis. It's not you're not making fun of the Germans. And Bob always said, we're not making fun of, we're not saying how stupid are the Germans, although that's kind of how it came out.
Right.
It's look how smart the Allies are. So he always made that distinction. It's not that the Germans were stupid. Primarily, you could see on the show, it's that they were afraid. Anytime
Yes.
someone did something, you'd hear, I'll just get the field marshal. Yes, sir. Anything you say, sir. I'll do that right now. They were afraid. And so the show really kind of highlighted that the Allies were really clever and could take advantage of that kind of thing. Every time they walked in somewhere dressed in Gestapo uniform or dressed in Luftwaffe uniform, saying, here I am, and I'll just get my friend, the field marshal. Oh, no, I'll let you right in. It was highlighting how clever the Allies were to be able to take advantage of that, but also showed exactly what was going on in a way that people could accept, watching a television show, which is just that, oh my goodness, these people were actually frightened.
Yeah, that is interesting because it's true.
The Luftwaffe always made the distinction that they were not Nazis. The
Right.
Luftwaffe was the Luftwaffe, and they said, we're not Nazis, we're the Luftwaffe. But they were scared, and they would do whatever they were told as soon as the Gestapo walked in the door.
Oh yeah, no, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Hey, there was something too there are so many aspects of this, but one was the competition between Richard Dawson and Bob Crane, but yet what I think either both or one of them was best man at the other's wedding. What did you
So,
take away? Was
Dawson was Bob's best man,
Yeah.
and according to his children, Karen said to us that Bob had always said to them, if I'm ever not here and you need something, you go to Dickie Dawson.
Huh.
And so they had a professional rivalry.
Okay.
And that can be a good thing and it can be a bad thing. But nobody that we spoke to on the show said that there was anything that interfered with them making the show good. It was a way of keeping them both on their toes. Now, Bob does allude to them having some issues when the show was canceled, when they announced that it was going as part of CBS's Rural Purge. Bob wrote letters to everybody in the cast, and Bob always cataloged, archived, collected everything. So if he wrote a letter, he had a copy of it. So there are copies in Bob's scrapbook of every letter he wrote to everybody in the cast to say goodbye. And in the letter to Richard Dawson, I don't have the book in front of me, maybe you do, Carol, but he does allude in the letter to that they've had their moments.
Interesting.
But nobody that we spoke to said there was ever any outright, mocking or complaining, or there was just an edge. Sometimes I do some acting, and some of the best actors I've worked with drive me crazy.
Right. Yeah, they push you to excellence is what happens. Yeah.
Different approaches, different ways of handling things. You might handle a line one way and they would think I would have handled that differently. So they did have some, there was some professional rivalry there. It was not what people try and say that he should have gotten the role. And so from then on, he was resentful of Bob the entire time. Richard Dawson himself said, as Carol said earlier, that role was not meant for me. It needed to be an American, and it should have been a real American, not someone putting on the accent. Because, when Richard Dawson auditioned, they couldn't even understand what he was saying.
I was going to say, in the book, it sounds like the cast members even had trouble understanding.
Yeah, they said, could you please not put on that accent? We can't understand what you're saying. So he put on a different accent. But imagine Richard Dawson trying to be American and doing the things that Bob did. There's just a swagger to an American that's different than the swagger of an Englishman.
I agree.
So there was a bit, but Can you find
I
the
have
letter
I
down?
have the letter right here. It's a short letter, so I'll read it.
Yeah,
It's not
do.
very long.
Let's
It
hear it.
says, so Bob says, "Dear Dick," because of course they all called Bob was Bobby and Dick, yeah, Richard Dawson. We call him Richard Dawson, but he was really Dick or Dickie Dawson. So,
Interesting.
dear Dick, it looks like Hogan's has come to an end, and we won't be working together for the next 24 weeks or whatever. I do want to take this opportunity to thank you for all your help during the past 6 years. I know we've had our differences, but I do believe it was only because of our individual desires to do the best job possible as we saw it. As I mentioned to you on the phone, the Vegas situation dissolved along with Frank Senis and the current economic situation in Vegas. So it's just as well we didn't expend any more effort than we did. And we can talk about that in a minute.
Sure.
Needless to say, I think you are one of the most talented guys I know, and your recent Merv Griffin appearance was a gas. I hope sometime in the near future we can work together again, and I hope on friendlier conditions. But in the meantime, thank you for all your help for the past 6 years. Bob.
Yeah, I mean, come on. Yeah, it's not that sounds like
That's really
professional
classy.
competition. Yeah, that is classy. Yeah, and
That's
by the
really
way, I want
classy.
to do a little aside there. Down the road, according to your book, Bob Crane actually is the person who recommends Richard Dawson for Family
Yes.
Feud, which makes him
Yes.
a multi-gazillionaire. I
Yes.
mean,
And
come
makes
on.
him find his wife.
Oh,
Hmm.
He
Yeah,
found
right,
his
right.
wife.
Yeah.
Richard Dawson's wife was a contestant on Family
oh
Feud. That's
my
how he met
gosh.
her.
Oh my gosh. That is
Bob was
funny.
always trying to help people, and
Ridiculously so.
he didn't stop helping others. When he got big in the business himself, he used that to help other people bring their careers up.
Mhm.
He was always trying to help. It's like if he didn't have this other piece, it would be like, gosh, is this guy even for real? Because he had so much good in him. It was almost like it was
Yeah.
super good. He did
Mhm.
all of this work for charities. He did, Armed Forces Radio Network. He doesn't get any credit for any of that
Mm.
philanthropic work
No,
that he
no,
did.
it overshadows that. Unfortunately, the way he died
Yes.
overshadows
Yes.
his entire career.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, he would go, I mean, you hear all about Bob Hope and going and entertaining the troops. Well, Bob did the same thing. He was going to the different bases and he was entertaining the troops on a regular basis. After, he got big as Hogan's, on Hogan's Heroes, he would go wearing the uniform and people would, the armed forces, men and women would cheer and applaud because, he was hugely supportive of our troops. He
Yeah.
Hmm.
being in radio, he had radio connections, and so during Hogan's Heroes, he was volunteering his time with the Armed Forces Radio Network. So, he was cutting records all the time and he would splice in. On his radio show, he did thousands of celebrity interviews. He was the
Right.
leading live celebrity interviewer of his time.
Yeah, it's so cool.
They wanted him to be the next Johnny, well, not the next, we think of it as the next, but they wanted him to do the Tonight Show. They wanted
Yeah.
him to take the Tonight Show. He declined it because he wanted to act.
Oh my gosh, I
Um,
didn't even realize
and
that.
and Johnny Carson takes it. So, it's
Wow, I did
people
not
say
know that. I don't know if I
yes,
remember that from the book. Wow,
yes. So
okay.
He did
Bob,
fill in for
yes,
Johnny
he
once in a
did.
while, and that he went.
Hmm.
Johnny
Hmm.
Carson was. I have to tell this because it just cracks me up.
Yeah,
Johnny
the
Carson was a
drumsticks. Yeah, the
drummer,
drums.
and Bob went into his office one day and he picked up his drumsticks and started. Johnny Carson does not like anybody touching his drums.
Yeah, yeah. I
I
Yeah,
mean,
mean, there are always a million little stories about the Sonny Bono. There's a Sonny Bono
the
story
Sonny
that you
Bono
remember
story.
from the book while Bob was in radio, and but
what's the
Bob
Sonny
was just a
Bono story?
guy.
I'm telling you, I know my audience real well, and I know they'll go, "What the heck was the Sonny Bono story?"
The Sonny Bono story. When Bob was in radio, Sonny Bono was what they call a record pusher. And
Yeah,
for
that's
those who
right.
don't know, in those days, what a record pusher was a guy who would go from radio station to radio station, say, "Here, please play these records, please play these records, please play these records." Now, Bob's radio show was based on a very different kind of music than the stuff that Sonny Bono was pushing. And because Bob liked, big bands and Frank Sinatra type
Very much
music
so.
and,
Yeah.
Tommy Dorsey and he'd play some other stuff, but, don't bring me this pop music, Dusty Springfield, Beatles stuff. That's not
It's
what Bob played. And Sonny Bono just kept coming and kept coming and kept coming and kept coming. And so
So
Sonny Bono came one day, and Bob was like, "Fine, wait in my office." And
he
I've just
locks
got to
him
go
in
to the bathroom.
yes.
So he let Sonny Bono in his office, and then he locked the door and went to lunch.
Oh no. Oh
Which is why
no.
Bob never appeared on the Sonny and
Sonny
Cher
Bono.
show because they wanted him. They wanted him. Cher said, "We've got to get Bob Crane." I mean, Bob was hot, hot, hot
Yeah.
everywhere and had a huge likability factor because Hollywood rates that when they're looking for
Oh, of
shows.
course.
Who has this likability factor? And Bob had a huge likability factor, even though he didn't have a show at the time that Sonny and Cher came on. They said, let's get him on the show. And Sonny said, "If you get him on this show, I quit."
Yes.
And so he never appeared on the show, and he never went and pushed records to Bob again.
Oh yeah, of course. Of course. Yeah, you wouldn't forget that moment. You'd never forget.
No.
Now,
But Bob was also, as Carol was saying, he was always helping. The thing is also, yes, Bob had some ego. All actors have to have some ego, or they can't do their job.
sure.
However, Bob was always grateful. His kids would tell us how, it's Father's Day and somebody calls and he's at a barbecue and they say, "Bob, I can't make this event and I'm due to do this public,
Yeah.
this public thing and I can't make it. Can you come?" And Bob would go. And if his wife said, "What are you doing?" He would say, "I owe these people everything. These people got me where I am. I have to go." So he never forgot that he did not get himself, onto Hogan's Heroes and to become this big TV star on his own. He always, always respected his fans. He always respected his roots. He never forgot. He always took time to spend time with his fans. And no good deed goes unpunished. He said once when these people came up to him at dinner, "Oh my God, I'm so excited to see you." Remember, this was the 60s and 70s. You
Oh
could
yeah.
smoke anywhere.
Right.
And they dropped their ashes in his steak. And he's like, "Oh, well, no good deed goes unpunished. Can I have another steak?" But
Yeah.
he never ignored that part. Part of it was Bob's personality, needing to please everyone. He did have his own psychological issues, which we all do, but they all were part of his makeup that helped lead to his addiction and whatnot. But the good side of that is that Bob always understood that an actor does not get to the level that Bob got to just because he's Bob. He
Right.
got there because he worked his tail off, but also
Yeah.
because people were willing to support him and people were willing
Give him a
to
shot.
give him a
Absolutely.
shot. People were counting on him. And if he was trustworthy, then he would, get that next step. But that's not always how it works in Hollywood. Sometimes you work your tail off and you're trustworthy and you help everyone and you get nowhere. And Bob knew that and respected and remembered that. And that is part of what makes Hogan's Heroes what it is, too.
To
Oh yeah.
piggyback on that too, as Bob also. So what happens in 1968, 1967, 68 is there's a film, The Wicked Dreams of Paula Schulz. And people get very confused about why they see Colonel Klink and Sergeant Schulz and Colonel Hogan and General Burkhalter in this film that is set during the Cold War in 1960s,
Yeah,
East
it is a
Germany,
little
West
bizarre, I have
Germany.
to admit.
It's
Yeah.
very bizarre. And so, Bob was offered the role, the leading role. He took it. But what he did, and this is a really fantastic example of what Bob did. He says to the producers of the film, "Hire as many people from Hogan's Heroes as you can, because the show is going on hiatus for, the time, whatever time it was,
Right.
March to whatever. We're not going to be filming. These people need to eat. They need a paycheck. Hire as many people as you can." And so they extended it to the cast of Hogan's Heroes. And the ones that took it, I mean, regardless of how well or poorly the film did, they got
They got
paid.
paid.
Okay.
And so Werner Klemperer, John Banner, Leon Askin all took advantage of the offer. And that is why you see those actors in that film along with Bob. And
Mhm.
yes, it is very confusing.
It
If
makes
you're
it
in the
very
midst,
Hogan-y.
if you're
Yeah.
in the midst
That's
of
that's
Hogan's Heroes run, you're dab smack in the middle, 1968 when that film
right.
comes out. And you're going to the movies because you see, oh, they're my, Bob Crane's in it, and I love Bob Crane. I love Hogan's Heroes. And then you see the rest, the leading cast in there. It is very confusing. And so it doesn't do very well because I think people couldn't separate
No,
those other
not at
characters
all.
from
Yeah.
this movie. And it's also very similar. You've got Bob, even though he's in a suit and everything,
Yeah,
he's in a
I
suit
know.
a lot of times when he goes into Hammelburg, on the
Right.
show. And so, it's a very confusing thing. But regardless of all that, people got paid. And he
No,
was
it was
looking
great.
out for his fellow
Mhm.
coworkers because it's just a job. People
Exactly.
forget.
Acting is a
People
job.
forget,
Yeah.
these aren't best friends. It's like, people pass away who have been on, various television shows. It doesn't matter if it's from the 1950s, 60s, 70s, or,
Mhm.
Friends.
Right.
It doesn't matter. They're not that character. They are their own
Right.
person. And this was a job. And yes, it can be a wonderful job and a fulfilling job, and they can all be friends, but it's not R.I.P. Colonel Hogan. It's Bob Crane. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
it's the
And
person.
But
And TV was very different in those days
yes.
because you didn't
Right.
get these, first you got your paycheck and it might have been $5,000 a week or whatever it was, or
Right.
500 or whatever. But you didn't get all those residuals like they get now. They're getting, they get
Right.
500,000 an episode and then every time the show runs, they get money. No, 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 no. That was not the case in those days.
Yeah.
So whatever you got paid is what you got paid. And I mean, Hogan's I think the first residuals from Hogan's came out in what did Scott
It
say,
was it was it was it,
1984
it
or something
was
like that?
it was the
You know,
early 80s. It was either
yeah.
It's
because
crazy.
Bob didn't
Crazy.
see anything. Bob himself, as the star of Hogan's Heroes, saw nothing because he died before that happened. His
Mhm.
estate gets the residuals, but
But
he
but
never did.
let's talk a little bit about that, by the way. I found that really interesting. So they offered him
Hmm.
a buy-in in essence.
Yes,
I think it was
Yeah.
like 17 to 25%,
it was
somewhere in there.
right. So,
So
yeah.
what ended up now exactly just like you said in the book.
Even that got shared.
Yeah, they never got anything,
Yeah.
whatever. But did his family in essence start to get part of that
Yes,
portion?
the estate did. The
In
estate
the
did.
And
So
how
80s.
long did
in
that
the
take
end,
until
right.
they actually started to see
I
that?
don't know. I don't know. But I
Well,
mean
they
when you
kept
think
saying that
about
the
it,
show wasn't
it's
making any money, so they
Right,
weren't getting anything. So because the show wasn't
the
making any
show
money, the show
didn't
wasn't
make
making
money
any money.
because it was hung up in the courts because of the plagiarism lawsuit with Stalag 17.
right,
And so they could have stopped production on the show while they were in those litigations. But
right,
the judge decided, no, we don't know what the verdict is going to be yet.
right.
We're going to see it through. So by the time the verdict comes, and the judge actually did a bench reversal in favor of Hogan's Heroes to say it was not a plagiarism issue, that it
Mhm.
was its own show. So the show, the producers, the creators, they won. The network won. Everybody
Yeah,
won that was affiliated with the show. But there were all of these legal fees that they had to pay back. And in so doing, the show was bankrupt. The show really never made money. When the show started, before any of these legal things came to light, because it was the playwrights of Stalag 17 that brought the suit to the table
and it was the
after.
idea of the show, and in particular the Schultz character, right? That they
Yeah,
were.
Yeah, I mean, you can
that's
see why
yeah,
they did,
Yeah,
right,
but
and I love
in
both,
the
by the way.
end,
Great movie.
yeah.
Yeah,
right.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah. You can see why they did it, but
yeah.
it just didn't pan out that way.
Wow.
so at the time when the cast was all hired, Bob as the star, and I can't speak to Werner Klemperer or John Banner or any of the
Mhm.
supporting cast, but Bob Crane as the star was given a 17.5% profit
Hmm.
participation. And so what that meant was we're going to take 17.5% of your paycheck and put it back into the show. So it's
Right.
it's a profit sharing program. Fast forward 5 years. Now you're going into the renewal of the contract, which was going to be for another 2 years,
Hmm.
not one. And so the cast that stayed on, Ivan Dixon left because he didn't want to get locked into another 2 year contract,
Hmm.
although he did say he would have done it if it had been for two.
He goes on to
Um,
direct. Yeah.
If he'd
yes,
known the
exactly.
show was only going to last for a year,
Right.
he would have stayed that last year.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
so at that time, they open it up more broadly to the rest of the cast and maybe even some of the others who were working on the show on a regular basis. And that is where you see at the end credits, and everybody asks, "What is it? What does that mean?" The Hogan's Hoard copyright stamp. That is to show this comprehensive profit sharing agreement that the supporting cast and maybe others had, where they were putting in some sort of percentage, like your 401 or whatever. They're putting
Right.
into it, and that is becoming part of what they're going to see back by way of residuals, by way of royalties. Bob, at that time, renegotiates, and he puts in a honking 25% of his paycheck. I can't imagine
Yeah.
doing
Oh
that.
my gosh.
That is a lot of money, no matter what you're making. That's
Right.
25% of your paycheck.
Right.
And because he believes in this show so much. So the show goes on. It comes to an early end because of, as Linda said earlier, the purge, the rural purge, where they ended shows that had a very specific demographic to make way for shows like the Mary Tyler Moore Show and
Hmm.
Archie, All in the Family, things like that, that were
Yeah, you
going
had
to deal with
Gomer
the
Pyle,
issues.
Beverly Hillbillies,
Lassie, yeah, all
yeah,
of those types of
Mayberry.
shows.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
wanted more cutting edge shows that were going to deal with the issues of the day.
Yeah.
So the show ends, but there are no residuals. And Bob and others, they were so angry. And it wasn't just Hogan's Heroes, it was Gilligan's Island, it was
Yeah.
McHale's Navy, it was all of those shows during that time period where, the actors were pouring money into the show and they never
Getting
saw any of
nothing.
that come back. And Bob then later said, maybe like 2 years later in an interview, if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't have done it. And
Hmm.
I tell people going into a show, don't do it. Take your money and run because you don't know.
Hmm.
Nothing is guaranteed. And nobody at that time could have ever, in a million years, known what today would be, where you can have a streaming service, where you can have
Oh,
DVDs, where you can be binge watching things.
right.
At most, you were going to get reruns on your local
Mm.
television affiliate and watch it
Hmm.
maybe once or twice a day, and every time it runs, you get a percentage. But beyond that, they were not thinking that this was going to be anything massive like it is today, where you can actually make some money on the residuals.
Do you think that without knowing, I mean,
Mhm.
obviously you don't have those figures in front of you,
Yeah.
but do you think that 25% that he in essence did, buy into,
Mhm.
that it did ultimately pay off for his family?
I think, I mean, I know that the estate
Well, which
gets
I kind of
yeah,
consider his
gets
family.
the,
Yeah,
yes,
right.
Yeah.
that they get whatever the royalties are now. Because remember, his second wife, she was still alive at the time he dies. So they go to her, and then when she passes away, it goes to her son, because of the way that the will was all set up, and that's a whole
Oh
different story,
wow,
and
I
that's a
didn't
big
realize that.
bone
So
of contention.
his kids from the
They
first marriage weren't getting jack.
no, mm-mm.
Oh,
No.
No.
And
They.
there's some,
mm,
you can't, who knows? Well, number one, who knows? Number two, it, is it a slight? Yes, it is. But number three, I look at it as for all of the time that Bob was after he left Anne and married Sigrid,
hmm.
he was paying alimony and child
Mhm.
support, and a lot of child support.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
They were not wealthy. They weren't rolling in it. Scott had to, when Bob died, they had to move out of Beverly Hills to Seattle to, get out of that area because it was too expensive.
Yeah.
They were not. Patty, Sigrid, she, she had some money. She was kind of carrying things a little bit. Bob was on the road doing dinner theater to continue to make money. And at that same time, his business manager was embezzling money from him as well.
Oh
And he
God, I don't
actually
know
went to
if I
jail.
recall that. Is that in the book?
hmm
God, I
Yep,
didn't remember that. Okay.
he went to jail for it, and that came out shortly after his murder because everything started to become investigated.
Oh,
Who was doing what,
right.
when, where.
Mm.
Right.
So
Bob trusted way too many
yes,
people,
he sure
way too
did.
easily, way too much.
Which
He
is
sure
always the
did.
biggest
He
mistake for
had he had
anyone
hmm
in the business.
zero, yeah, Bob had
Yep.
zero judgment of character.
Hmm.
So
Zero.
yeah, and
Zero.
getting back
Zero
to
character. He could not.
yeah,
He
yeah,
could not. I
it
just
was.
heard
Yeah.
from Karen, by the way.
Oh, did you?
I just heard from Karen, Carol. So Bob's first wife, just as a side note, just passed away this week.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. I didn't
She
even
was,
know that.
yeah,
hmm
well, it's his daughter's just announced it, but
Wow.
she was 96 years old.
Oh my gosh.
um, and
Wow.
an extraordinarily strong woman.
Yeah.
So, God rest her soul, but may she rest in peace. But, she and Bob's family have always said the same. Bob just trusted everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody had good intentions because, I mean, that's naive to the max, but that was
To the
Bob.
max. Yeah.
This guy who was embezzling from him, he had no idea. I trust him. He's going to do the right thing.
Oh, you
These
hear
people are
that
going to do the
story
right thing.
so often, by the way. Oh my gosh.
These people got to do the right thing. When you get one of those deer in headlights kind of people in Hollywood, you are just taken advantage of. I mean,
Oh,
it was
big time.
Sigrid who had to
Yeah.
protect him from going to a mafia guy's house because he didn't
Yes.
realize. He's like, oh no,
Yeah.
he's like, no, they are the mob. We are not going to spend
Oh
a
my
Yeah.
weekend over
gosh.
He
there.
was
You know,
way too trusting, way too trusting,
Yeah.
he
and
had
he
no,
had no idea. Like, and his son Scott has told us this. That Karen,
yeah,
people who have known him for a long time had told us this, that he just wanted everybody to like him,
Yeah.
yeah.
and to get those people to like him, he would, you know,
Let them walk all over him.
yeah,
Yeah.
Right.
yeah,
And
Right.
but not openly. Like he didn't
No,
say,
no,
I'm
no,
just going
no.
to let these people do whatever they want. It was just, he could not see
Right.
if someone was doing something like he could not see if someone was walking all over him.
Right.
He loved everyone had good intentions. If he had good intentions, they had good intentions. If
Wow.
they missed, if there was something out, oh, they didn't mean to do that, or just it was just incredibly frustrating for people to because they had to protect him, and he didn't
Right.
come across as a guy who needed protection,
Right.
but in his real life, he needed to be protected because he could not, for a man who his interviews were incredible. I don't know if you ever get a chance to listen
Hmm.
to any of his air checks, listen to any of his celebrity interviews. He was glib, and a couple of people like Shelley Berman couldn't stand him.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
big time.
but
Couldn't
because
stand
yeah,
him.
they didn't
Yeah.
but
understand it.
he
Right.
didn't understand what Bob was trying to do. But if for a man who Alfred Hitchcock would send him roses all the time. Danny Kaye ran in from the airport to do an interview with him. He just wanted to get on the show. I'm coming in from the airport. Here I am.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
for a person who had that much connection and was able to bring out so much from other people, he had zero insight into what
Hmm.
was behind what they said or what they did. It's a
Right.
very unusual situation. As an interviewer, like I did most of the one-on-one interviews. Like Carol was there with questions and whatnot, but I would prepare the interviews. I would
Hmm.
sit down in the middle of the night because where I am, it was the middle of the night.
You're in
And
Australia, right? Is that
I
right?
am in Australia,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, we would I remember talking to Gary Owen at 3 a.m.
Wow. Wow.
Or we'd talk to Paul Peterson at 1:30 in the morning, and yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then I'd go back to sleep, and then I'd get up and go to work. But
Yeah.
if I prepare an interview and I sit down and I talk to someone, I'm listening and I'm figuring out what they're trying to say when they're talking, and you feed off of that and you go to the next thing, and you have a prepared list of, I mean, late night show hosts can do that.
Right.
If
Right.
you have a list of questions you want, but if somebody goes in this direction, you
You
go
go.
off with them because you're
Yeah.
listening. and
Sure.
you want to understand this. And Bob could do all of that
Yeah.
and then still not realize whether anything was genuine.
Right.
To some degree, for the
Right.
people that
Right.
he was dealing with himself. It's a very unusual combination because to be able to do that job well, normally you need to be able to have that insight to go, I call BS,
Right. Exactly. Exactly. But
you
it
know.
was in him.
And Bob
Yeah.
could do that with interviewing,
Right.
but he couldn't seem to do it with real life. It's a
Yeah.
very unusual
That
combination, I
is,
must
that
say.
is. Hey,
Yeah.
you know what? Just 'cause I do want to, I want to talk a little bit more on Hogan's.
Mhm.
Um, with Werner Klemperer and John Banner. I did find that interesting. It sounds like there was competition between them for the lines. Like, is that picked up?
Banner was a hog. Banner was a scene. There's a whole episode called Hogan Goes Hollywood, and half the joke is how how Schulz is always, sticking his hand in front of someone's face or coming up in front of someone.
Yeah.
And Alan Oppenheimer played the actor Byron Buckles, who was going crazy because here's Schulz going, fine, you know. um, and and that and everyone agreed, I think, that yes, he was a bit of a hog in that way. So it was kind of an attention thing. I mean, the stars of the show were Bob, Werner, and John.
Oh yeah.
Period.
Yep.
Bob first, Werner a close second, and John.
Yeah.
But John was larger than life in real life and on screen. And so yeah, he often looked for those moments to shine. But again, it's that idea of, sometimes that can get in the way. So if or it can cause some tensions, but they
Was
always
there
managed to
tension
make that
between them?
work.
Was there some
Not
tension?
I was going
tension.
to say it's
No,
professional.
yeah, I mean
Just
they had some jealousy
hmm.
moments where, they had some
Oh, of course.
professional je rivalry, I guess would be the right word,
Okay.
because they
Yeah.
were, I mean, and you got to remember Werner Klemperer is coming at it from, he's not, he plays that role so perfectly. And
Yeah,
I
he's
think the reason he
meant to
plays
be.
it so perfectly is because he has this serious history of
Mhm.
Mhm.
being a serious actor in
Right.
all of
Very.
these very serious films. And so you're taking that persona and putting it into a caricature. And it's, I think that's what makes it work. But you've also got an ego there that's kind of colliding with
It comes through
another
so
big,
well for
yeah.
Clink. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Did
I think
hey
the fact that he played Clink straight, even in all of his most ridiculous moments, makes his character just perfect.
Oh,
You
perfect.
know,
Oh
the
yeah.
the indignant manner, the indignance of it, and the offense when Hogan does something, and the idea that he wants to be important and all. It's just played so well. I mean, it's
It
so
is.
clear that he's such a. But he did have that deal. If he can't, if Clink ever wins, he's out.
Mm, that's interesting.
The only time I ever saw Clink win was when they offered him Berger Hassen, what's her name? Berger Hassenfoffel. Hagenfossel. Bertha Hagenfossel, the young,
So
rich, lovely widow.
Werner Klemperer has this great, great, great quote about how he played Clink, and he says, and I'm looking at
Sure.
one of his interviews, and it says to play him, meaning Clink, I keep thinking arthritic. Then physically and mentally, everything shrinks. He's tragically comical, but never completely stupid, because he must be a real person, and he must at all times be in the wrong. His vanity and his pompousness are his undoing.
Yeah. Oh, is that well? That is so well put. By the way, the other thing too is the pilot. I thought this was really interesting too because you have these actors coming from such different arenas. You got Bob Crane with the massive radio background, one of the top in the country, really. You've got Werner Klemperer, as you said, more of a dramatic, heavy actor. John Banner, by the way, too, he sounds like he had a bit of a like he could dance or musical background. Something was in there, and so you're putting these together, and then you've got, of course, Robert Clary. We can say, the Holocaust survivor, all this. But the one thing I took away in your book is that in that first pilot, no egos.
No,
I feel
Oh
like there weren't
no,
egos
no.
going on
they
at
were
all.
just
They
worried
were
about
very
getting it
close.
right.
They wanted to
Yeah,
get it right,
no
and they
Yeah,
wanted
egos.
they were
to.
all tight.
Yes. Yep. They wanted to make it work. They wanted it to be successful. And
Huh.
that's what and that comes from the top. And so from the top, there are
Yeah,
different levels of top. So you have Edward Feldman, who is the head producer, the executive producer
Yeah, you
of,
see
of
his
it.
name at the end of every single
Every
episode.
single
oh
Yeah,
episode.
yeah,
And
yeah,
you've got Bernard
yeah,
Fine, who is one of the co-creators.
right.
Al Ruddy did not want to, he sold his portion of it and went on and did The Godfather, that small film that
Yeah, no
that he
kidding.
did. And if you see the offer on Paramount, where they talk about it's the whole build up to how they came to um, produce and film and create The Godfather the movie. In
hmm
the first episode, Al Ruddy and Bernard Fine, the actors who are playing those two individuals, they reenact the dog scene, the barking scene for Hogan's Heroes
Oh
because
my
and
God.
and what's great about that, and when I watched it, I couldn't help but smile because Al Ruddy, when Linda
yes.
and I were on the phone with him, reenacted that and barked and did the whole thing for
Oh, it
us
was fantastic.
as
One of the
they
best
Sorry.
interviews
it
ever.
was it
One of the
was it
best
was
interviews
it
ever.
was such a fantastic interview, and that so to know that we have, because we have them all recorded,
Right.
and we have this beautiful piece of Hollywood gold in our possession that they reenacted for The Offer, which was the
That's
story
so
of making The
funny.
Godfather.
Yeah.
It just, that first episode, there's a lot of Hogan's Heroes mentioned in there because, of course, Al Ruddy is coming up into the world of writing and directing and producing, and he and Bernard Fine have produced, they've written the screenplay.
Right.
And, that's where Al Ruddy gets his foot in the door. And he gets kind of laughed out of various offices as well because what he has to his, claim to fame is Hogan's Heroes. And they're like, well, what's that guy going to do, right? He can't,
Right.
So
Right.
he ends up, it's a great series to watch if anybody hasn't seen it yet, because it does produce, it does tell the whole story. Al Ruddy had a hand in making that series. Um,
I loved it because the stories that he told on that series were the stories that he
he
told
told us.
us. And I'm like,
That's
I knew
really
that. I knew
wild.
that
It's
story. I already knew that
so
Now I
story.
gotta go.
wonderful.
Now I gotta go watch the whole
You
thing.
got to go
Thanks.
watch The Offer. You got to
There
go
we
watch The
go.
Offer.
And
But
there's another Hogan's Heroes connection that you'll only get if you watch The Fablemans.
yes, yes, yes,
If you have seen The Fablemans, because the
You know what?
story
I
of
haven't
Steven
seen it yet. It
Spielberg
is on my list.
yes,
Yeah.
in
I heard it's
yeah.
at
great,
the
but yeah.
very, very end,
Hmm.
you see this. It's the story of Steven Spielberg, of
Right.
course.
Hmm.
And at the very, very end, and when I met with Karen a couple of years ago, when I went back to the States a couple of years ago, I do go upon occasion, but I met up with both Karen and Scott separately for dinner and lunch and whatever. And Karen said, I had no idea. And I had to call and ask. And they said, yes, this was true, that Steven Spielberg's first real Hollywood job was working as an intern on Hogan's Heroes.
Oh, wow. Now
And
that's
he would fetch
cool.
Bob his coffee.
Because, and Scott, and I
Wow.
spoke with Scott about it because they had to ask the estate to use Bob's photo on the wall
Yes,
in the movie.
correct,
Oh,
correct.
So he walked
wow.
into Bernie Fine's office, I think it was, wasn't he?
Hmm.
Walks into Bernie Fine's
Hmm.
office, and there are all these photos on the wall of people from Hogan's Heroes. And I think the mistake was that they used Sigrid Valdis instead of Cynthia Lynn, but that might have been an estate thing. And they had these pictures on the wall of their new show, and
Hmm.
he was going to work
Okay, now I
in
gotta
Hollywood.
watch it just because of
It's
that.
it's like
That's
it's
cool.
literally like in the
Yeah.
last 2 minutes of the movie. The movie's very good, but it's
Yeah.
literally in like the last 2 minutes.
Oh,
And
that's
she said,
wowie.
I had no idea
Wow.
that
Wow.
he was part of the Hogan's Heroes story.
An intern. Oh my gosh, is that
Intern,
But you know
crazy?
intern.
what? You know what? If you look at the credits on Hogan's Heroes, you'll see familiar names. So I
Yeah.
think it's Michael Kahn, who was the film editor for Hogan's Heroes and goes on to become Steven Spielberg's film editor. And you'll see his name
Hmm.
at
Oh
the end
wow.
of Raiders of the Lost Ark and of other films that he has done. So yeah, so you do see
I
the
Yeah.
love all
growth
that tie-in.
Hogan's was a
from that.
chance for everybody to do something right. I think that in the beginning, I think part of what was happening, um, and I'm going to paraphrase what we got from several different people,
Yeah,
was
sure.
that they all knew that they were doing something different. They
Hmm.
all felt that they were doing something special. They knew that they were going to get pushback. They knew that they were kind of touching the edges, pushing the envelope a
Hmm.
little bit. It's
Hmm.
20 years after the war. A lot of the people who are in the show were involved in the war in one way or another, either
Right.
as people running from it or serving in it.
Yeah.
Again, it's only 20 years after the war. A lot of the crew would have been involved in the war, or their families or whatnot. So they all knew that there was something different about this. They knew that there was a spark. Kind of like a lightning in a bottle thing. You couldn't quite put your finger on what was happening, but they knew that there was something.
Hmm.
And the most important thing was that the whole was greater than the sum of its parts. And so they brought them all together and said, let's just keep us together as a family like this.
Hmm.
And when it worked, it worked. And the pilot, of course, in those days isn't something that used to air. So although we see the pilot now, the audiences in those days did not.
Interesting.
So we see Colonel Burkhalter, whereas of course it made more sense for him to have a hold over or some, um, some authority over Clink.
Right.
Clink was very, very Prussian and mine, and my dear Clink, I do, and those kinds of things, Camp 13 became Stalag 13 after the first couple of episodes. But in the beginning, the pilot is not, which is why people say, why is Carter a lieutenant in the pilot? And why is he, he's on the outside and he came in and now he's a sergeant. Did he get demoted? It's like, no, that was a pilot. Pilots didn't air in those days. And so what they
It
did
is.
was they showed this and then they said, okay, now let's fix it. Now let's make it, they've test run it and this works better than that. So
Hmm.
this is how we're going to do this. And we don't want the Russian guy in anymore. It makes no sense. He's too old to have actually been sitting in a Luftwaffe POW camp. So we're not going to have the Russian guy anymore. He will tell you, the Russian guy would say to you, I didn't want to do it. I thought it was terrible. But the truth was that might be true, but he took the job. He just wasn't offered the series
Right.
uh,
Right.
because it
And he
didn't
was
make
older.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't make, and I understand that as he hated he hated the war and he hated the Germans and
Right.
he thought it was making fun of it and whatever,
Probably
but he
even
took the
more close
job.
to home for him than anyone else. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but he took the job,
Well,
but when
yeah,
it
he's an
came
actor.
to, when they
Yeah.
say, why weren't you in the series? He never says to them, because I didn't get offered.
Right. Right.
He says,
Exactly.
it's because I
Exactly.
hated it all.
Yeah.
However, they did have Larry Hovis, who did a nice
Right.
job in the pilot, and they said, hey, would you like to come in as a regular? It makes more sense for this guy to
Yeah.
be in there as a regular. You will see these actors doing other shows, particularly Larry Hovis, during the run of Hogan's Heroes, because they were what they call day players. They weren't in every scene.
Right.
There are occasional episodes where you won't see Larry Hovis or you won't see Richard Dawson, and you'll see other
Oh, definitely.
people.
It is
Um,
noticeable, by the way, when they're not
oh
there.
yeah, because
Yeah.
when you see Father Mulcahy standing in for for Carter, you go, "Excuse
Other
me,"
Mulcahy, I love it.
um, you know, or here's Olsen in for an entire episode. He did actually audition to be a series regular. He just and he says he was offered, but said no. I don't know whether that's true or not.
Yeah.
But his interview, his responses to us were unusual to say the least, and we'll leave that there. You can read it in the book.
Right. Hey,
But
by the way, Larry Hovis, voice of Sinatra. I mean,
and most
come on.
amazing guy does accents, and I mean Bob was known as the man of a thousand voices for radio,
Yeah.
but to watch Larry Hovis change, transform into all these German characters. They're my
Yeah,
favorite parts of the
me
show.
too. I couldn't
But
believe that
beautiful
about his
voices,
voice, though. I
beautiful
was like,
voices.
he is
Well, the
not.
boys did an album.
Yeah.
The
Hmm.
heroes like Hovis and Clary and Dixon and Dawson did an album called Hogan's Heroes Sings World War II. And that's their real voices. And there are a couple of episodes where you'll hear them singing, little tiny bits to fool the Germans or
Yeah,
whatever. You'll
yeah,
hear them
yeah. Sure,
singing this
sure.
beautiful harmony. That's their real voices. They were fantastic. In those days, you needed to have multi-talents to get
Oh yeah.
through because we're
Right.
also transitioning from radio to television. The age they were
Mhm.
was transitioning, to regular television, to color television,
Oh,
to
big
from
time.
radio. But like Hovis would go and do it was in the pilot of Laugh-In. Hovis did Laugh-In for a
Wow.
while.
Wow.
So they would let these guys go off and do other things and then pull them back for Hogan's Heroes. And if there was an issue with a conflict of interest, usually they'd let them go and do their other thing, and someone else would sit in their place. But
That's
yeah,
so wild.
amazing, amazing voices and talents, and
Yeah.
And
What?
talking about that,
Oh, go ahead.
real quick, after Hogan's Heroes ended, um, Bob had written what we would kind of consider a sequel to this. And it
Hmm.
was supposed to be
What was that? Oh, she just
oh,
went.
she muted for
She
the
muted
dog, I
herself.
think.
Okay.
so, but it was supposed to be a talent show in
Yeah.
Las Vegas, and it was going to be Werner Klemperer, Robert Clary, and Richard Dawson, which was in the letter that he had
Right.
written to Richard
Hogan's
Dawson.
Heroes Review. Right.
Yes,
Yes.
Yeah.
exactly. And that was to have built on the talents of the cast who
Right.
had all of this, vaudevillian type of
It's an
talent.
interesting take. I mean, I will say that. I was like, interesting. By the way, John Banner, he was originally supposed to be part of this, right? And then he
And
he
then he passed.
he
Yeah.
passed. Yeah.
Yeah.
That-
Yeah, they enjoyed working together, and the fact that they were going to come together and do it again wasn't just a guarantee of another job, although it
right.
was I want to work with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's one of the things that he talks about with Dawson. Clary was going to do it, and it was
They,
just it was just this. They realized that what they had working together was good.
Yeah, it was
And you can
magic.
put aside
yes,
some
it was
professional
magic.
pettiness to do something for the greater good. And I think
Yeah.
all of these people, all of these men and ladies had that capacity and professionalism and talent
Hmm.
and confidence in their talent to be able to
Mhm.
say, look, Bob used to chew lollies, candies, hard candies and stuff during
Lollipops.
during the shoot. It would
Right.
drive Larry Hovis insane. Well, he
Yeah.
finally broke a tooth and had to go to the dentist in the middle of a shoot to get it fixed because it broke one of his teeth.
Unbelievable.
But you know what? He said, but you know what? All that did was I go, well, he's not doing it during shooting and he's here, so just shut up and deal with it.
Yeah. And then he
And
had his
Right.
drums, right? He would go and
He
play the
would
oh
have his
drums in
yeah,
drums in
between.
his
if you
dressing
wanted to know
room.
where
Yep.
he was on the set, you
Yep.
just
You
listened.
just
Because if he wasn't on the set itself, he was in his dressing room, either writing, answering fan mail, signing letters, or playing the damn drums.
he
But he
It
loved
was
wasn't
his
just a
they had to
drummer.
get
I
him a
drums.
mean,
soundproof
he was
room because
he was
He
he
was
great.
very,
Yeah.
very, very good
Bob's
on
like,
drums.
just so people out
He
there
was
know, I
so
mean,
good.
Bob was like big band drummer. I mean,
He
this guy could
was.
sit
yeah,
in
that's what he wanted to do for
big
a
time.
living.
He
Yeah.
he
Yeah, that's
adored
what he
his
wanted to
drums.
do.
Wow. Wow. What by the way, so how one of the things too that I took away is that the Hogan's Heroes review, the failure of it really hurt. Sounds like
Oh
that was
yeah.
like because
Yeah, and
didn't it
it
go
was
because of the
Yeah.
Vegas like the whoever was behind it in Vegas, they
he was dirty. He was dirty.
right.
So when Bob found that out, because he wanted to take a cut of
Mm.
what they were going to be bringing in,
Hmm.
and it
Mhm.
wasn't on the table. It wasn't on the level,
Right.
and he he said, "Forget it. We're going to find another place to do it." And then the whole thing went south. So they had filmed after the show had ended. They had filmed. Um, like a goodbye scene, like a farewell scene. There was like a boat, and they were going home. They were leaving. They were
Oh,
on their way back
wow.
to the States, and Colonel Klink was going to be Colonel Hogan's manager, and LeBeau was going to be part of the talent, and then
Wow.
one of Bob's other friends, wonderful man, Johnny Thompson, who was a magician, and he's since passed. But he was a magician. He and his wife were very, very, very dear friends of Bob's.
Hmm.
They were consultants to Penn and Teller,
Oh
Chris
my
Angel,
God.
other magicians, and so as part of this, before, just as a kind of side step here, before they knew that the show was not going to go for the
No,
seventh
stop that.
season, the
Stop that.
contracted
Mhm.
season, John Banner was uncertain if he was going to be able to continue his role of Schultz.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
Johnny Thompson was kind of in the pocket as to someone who would come in and not replace the character, but be the new sergeant of the guard
Oh,
for that last
interesting.
season because John Banner was so ill
He
at
wasn't
that
well.
time.
Yeah.
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 He
So
doesn't, he dies before the end of the seventh season. Is that right?
72.
No, he died in 73,
So he dies right after it.
right after it. He was
Yeah.
in Vienna, I think it was his birthday. Um, and it was after the end of the series. It was after what
73.
would have
You're
been the
right.
end of series 7.
Yep, you were right with 73.
And he
January
died,
Yeah.
he
28th,
dies of
1973.
what does he die of
A
in Vienna?
stomach. mm, I can't remember, Carol.
Aneurysm. Aneurysm.
Aneurysm. Okay. Okay. I got you. So here's the other thing, because people are going to be listening to this. They're going to go, okay, so tell me about, how, we cut forward to the death of Bob Crane. Now, Bob Crane is out. He's doing dinner theater. At this stage of the game, he's in Arizona. He's kind of come together a little bit. He's basically saying, um, yes, I'm a sex addict, and he's confiding in a priest who happens to also be a producer.
Yes.
Of
Yes.
a play producer or theater producer. What can you kind of take us there, and what did happen for people that don't know, and then what you did uncover, whether it be that it is this person or it alluded to this person. Just what if you can go there, who wants to take the lead on that one?
You start and
So,
I'll take the theories.
okay.
Okay, cool.
You're going to hear River adding to this, and I'm very sorry. Um,
Don't worry. That's her
um,
dog. She has a
that's my
four
dog.
month old puppy. Okay.
I've
So,
got about just as an FYI, I've got about 15 minutes and then I must run, but if you want to continue after that, feel free.
Okay, you got it. You got it,
So,
Linda.
Okay.
so Bob was in Arizona. He was doing, as I mentioned before, dinner theater, keeping him on the road because he was needing to make money. He was in Scottsdale, Arizona, doing the play Beginner's Luck. He is, Bob was very serious about all the work that he did. He was, even though it was dinner theater and maybe a step down from what he had used to had been doing as an A-lister, he poured all his heart and soul into his plays, and his play Beginner's Luck was his play in as far as he wrapped his arms around it. He wanted to make it a movie. He wanted it to be the most perfect thing that you would see. It's a very, very funny play.
Even
Having
rewrote
read
like a
it,
portion of the play, right?
he would edit it. He would go through and he would continue to update it and edit it and send the changes back to the owners of the play,
Mhm.
and then they would reincorporate it, and then he would go back and do some more editing and changing. But
Yeah.
he was always kind of bringing it up to, like, he was keeping it contemporary to the time. So a play that had been written in like the mid 60s or so, now it's 1978. So the jokes that maybe were being told in 1968 aren't maybe as relevant in 1978. So he's
Yeah.
going through and he's making his updates. He goes to Scottsdale. He didn't really want to go. He had a bad sensation, a bad feeling for it. He thought, this is a mob town. I'm really a little bit, uneasy about this.
Wow.
But he does go, and he performs. He has several runs of that particular show, which usually his plays all get very good ratings in the press. They're very, very well received by the audience, by the critics, by the press. But this particular run, he had trouble. And we have an audio tape of, unfortunately, we don't have any video of it. There is some video that exists, but we have a full audio recording of one of the last performances that he did
Gosh,
for
wild.
Beginner's Luck. And on one side of this tape, he has written disaster. And on the other side, he has written terrible. This was a
Wow.
terrible, terrible performance.
Huh.
So he brings in another actor to take the place and try and recover some of the things that were going wrong. Like people like breaking, as Linda will tell you, as an actor, you don't break the fourth wall, and they're like
Right.
mugging for the audience and driving him absolutely crazy. You don't do those sorts of things when you're acting, when you're on stage,
Yeah.
unless you're absolutely meant to and it's part of the script. Um, he has John Carpenter with him. So John Carpenter, John Henry Carpenter, who is different from the film producer, you know,
Right.
okay, just to make that very, very clear. And for that sake, we'll say John Henry Carpenter. He is this hanger on. He has been hanging on since the days of Hogan's Heroes. It is unclear if Carpenter was introduced to Bob by Richard Dawson, or if Bob had introduced Carpenter to Dawson. We're not really sure, but what we know is that they shared a love of the video equipment. They also shared a love of the extracurricular activities, having sex with multiple women, filming the women. It's very important to say that these women were all consensual. They were adult. There was no drugging, no coercion.
Wasn't
They,
hidden camera.
it was
God,
not
no.
hidden.
Right.
No, it was, and in
Not even possible
1978,
in those days when you
it,
think about what cameras looked like then to
huge.
versus what you can do now.
Correct.
People tend to think about hidden cameras now because, and even in the last 20 years, because, here's my camera.
Yeah.
You can't see it because it's purple, but it's my
Right.
phone.
Right.
Here's my
There
phone.
it
You can
is.
put
Yeah.
this anywhere and nobody will ever know if it's recording and you're done. But in those
Exactly.
days, a camera could take up freaking half the
Well,
room.
and
Yeah.
if you see the
Yeah.
crime scene photos, and if you're inclined to go look at them, and we've seen them, and they're horrible and they're
I was going to say, I
gruesome.
don't think I can hack it.
They're
Yeah.
very, very gruesome. But there are crime scene photos of other areas of the apartment, and one of them is the
Yes.
Mm.
living area, the living room area, and you see the whole setup. You've got the tripod, you've got the camera head, you've got everything all set up
Wow.
for
That is wild.
here we go. We're going to, there was no hiding it. Bob was one to say, he, number one, didn't pay for it. He said that I would never bring myself to that level of having to pay for sex. He also, he was an A-lister. So if
Mhm.
Colonel Hogan is walking up to you, so Bob didn't drink, he didn't smoke, but he did go to bars. He did go to places where he knew he
Yeah.
could pick up women. So if you're at the bar and you see Colonel Hogan coming up to you, and let's face it, it's the 70s.
I was just going to say the
It's a
timing is
different time. It's
unbelievable.
a different era.
Right.
So, if he's walking up to you and saying, "Hey, what do you think?" And women said yes. A lot of women said no. And if they said no, he just was like, "Okay, move on to the
Right.
next one." It was not about that coercion that we hear about today, like with Bill Cosby and all of the other things that we hear about
Right. He
today.
wasn't drugging these
He
women. He
was
was,
not drugging these women. He was
right.
not forcing these women. There were absolutely no children. Bob
Right.
Mm.
adored kids and protected kids. He
Right.
did not do anything to harm children. This was adult consensual sex. And I'll say, he was not the only person living this kind of lifestyle.
Right.
Mm.
You look at, and I use Night Court as an example because it was something that people made fun of. If you look at Dan Fielding's character, John Larroquette's character of
Mhm.
Dan Fielding, who I just absolutely adore,
Oh
he
God,
has
I
this
love him.
character who is this lecherous, having sex with every woman that walks into the courtroom, right? But
Right.
then there's this side of him that can't bring himself to cross a line with, say, Christine Sullivan because he respects her. And so you
Right.
have this kind of type of person in Bob Crane. So he's trying to have all of this sex, but he does not want it to be forced. He wants to enjoy it, and he wants the woman to enjoy it as much as he's enjoying it.
Right.
And what has happened is that this has led to it started off small, as all things do, and it becomes this out of control thing where he cannot control it
He
in
has
as
like
far as,
literally a tape library, like a large
yes,
library
yes, he
of
he did.
film. So you know
And
how many women we're talking about. Yeah.
exactly, thousands, hundreds, thousands of women. And so, did his wives No, yes, they did. Is it our business to know why they stayed with him? Because you have to remember, Bob left Anne. Anne
Right.
didn't leave Bob. So after 20
Right.
years of marriage, Bob leaves Anne. So yes, he gets dinged because it's like he's now, oh, the celebrity who, is throwing away his, high school sweetheart or whatever. Regardless, she stayed with him during all of those escapades.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she knew. And
Mhm.
so whatever their arrangement was, that was between them. Same way with Patty, Sigrid Valvis.
Hmm.
They had an arrangement. Whatever that was, it was between them. We cannot judge.
Of course.
But
Yeah.
you fast forward to Scottsdale, June 28th, 1978. He performs his play. It is met with very good response. The changes that he put in place with the cast and with other elements, it worked well. He has a good response. John Carpenter is there. So after the show, and he signs his autographs, which he did every single night. He would go out, he'd greet his fans. He comes out of the theater and his car has a flat tire.
Oh,
And so
geez.
there is speculation that that was a first failed attempt on his life. We
Oh
don't
my
know
gosh.
who the murderer is because the crime has never been officially solved. They all point to John Carpenter. It is what it is, but they think that that was a failed first attempt. So Bob
Wow.
gets the car tire fixed. He and John Carpenter then go to a diner, Bobby McGee's, where a waitress claims to have seen them arguing. And it's at that point that they think that Bob was, for lack of a better term, breaking up with John. Like he doesn't want
Right.
him to, he doesn't want to run this type of lifestyle anymore because throughout all of this, he has been talking to Reverend Ed Beck. Now, Ed Beck was the manager of the Windmill Dinner Theater. He had been put there in place by the United Church of Christ because of the fact that they have all of these actors coming in from, Los Angeles. They're traveling. They may need somebody to talk to. And he doesn't come in and say, hey, I'm this minister. He comes in and he says, I'm the manager. I'm going to sign your paycheck. I'm going to unlock the theater,
Yeah. Yeah.
do the
Yeah.
paperwork. And so it's not known that he is this minister who is also providing some sort of counseling.
Yeah.
And so while in Scottsdale, Bob asks another person affiliated with the theater, I'm looking for somebody to talk to. I have a problem that I need to talk through with somebody. Doesn't go into any detail, but I'm sure people kind of maybe knew because he was not as secretive about this lifestyle as he'd been earlier on. And they point him to Reverend Beck. And it's at that point that Reverend Beck starts talking to him and saying, these are the things that you need to do. I am an addiction counselor, but I am not specifically in this area. I cannot really guide you professionally because I don't have sexual addiction as a specialty. And mind you, keep in mind, this is not, again, today where we have
No,
those
I was
types
going to
of
say, and where
counselors.
that sexual addiction person
It's
was, who knows?
who
You
knows.
know?
So that
Hmm.
so he sends Bob, he says, I'm going to give you people, therapists, counselors back in Los Angeles that I'm going to put you in touch with them. They are going to help you. This is probably the hardest addiction that you could possibly have because women are everywhere. It's not like alcohol where you don't
Mhm.
buy the alcohol, you don't go to the bar. Drugs, very difficult, but you can keep that physical substance away from you. You walk out your front door and you have women, and
Yeah.
so right away that temptation is automatically in front of you. And so he talks with Reverend Beck, who says you have to perform surgery. You need to start cutting the enablers out of your life, and John
Mhm.
Carpenter was an enabler. So this so-called, I don't want to say it was an argument, but it was a heated discussion where it is thought that Bob was saying, no, I am not going to hang out anymore. This is the end of our run. We're not going to do this lifestyle anymore. We're done.
And
And
he
so,
does hint too that he wants to go home. Like he's
yes,
ready.
he's going to go home.
He's
And
ready. He's making that change. So
yes,
everything is laid out. You can see it.
everything is laid out. And he is also told part of his cutting this part of his life out is to get rid of the tapes. And so he was going to go home and destroy
Oh,
all of the tapes. Now, it's not a switch, you don't
No.
Linda and I aren't therapists. We talk to four experts in sexual addiction
You
for
did
the
a good
book.
job, by the way, in the book of bringing them in, and anybody that would have a sexual addiction, if they
Mhm,
were reading this, would go, interesting. Should
mhm.
try that. I thought that was well done. Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So he does have his marching orders for when he goes back home. The problem is he doesn't make it home. So that
Right.
night he goes to bed. He has an argument with his wife. Um, they say on the phone.
Oh,
Um, he was shouting. His voice, the neighbors were saying, "Oh, if he keeps that up, he's not going to be able to perform tomorrow." The neighbors in the apartment building. Um,
I do have a point to make about that, however, if I may just dip
Dip
my
your toe in.
logical finger
please
in
do.
here. These people who say they heard him screaming for an extended period of time, if you're screaming that loud, they're going to hear what you say, and yet none of them can tell us a word he was saying.
Oh boy.
So there,
Right.
yes, he raised his voice because even his wife said at John Carpenter's trial, yes, we were having an argument. Yes, he was shouting, but I can't believe that they were saying, he was shouting for an hour, and this it couldn't have
Mhm.
been. It just couldn't. It made zero sense that
You'd have
one,
heard
nobody's going to
something.
shout for an hour.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can't hold that kind of intense emotion for an hour. Two,
Mhm.
I mean, his wife said they weren't on the phone for that long. But
Right.
if you're shouting for an hour, somebody's going to hear what you're saying. They're not just going to hear.
Right.
Mhm.
You're going to hear something, and yet no one could hear anything. And so, but yes, they did argue, but just like at Bobby McGee's when they said, oh, they had this horrible argument, and then it turns out that the police had put words in their mouth.
Mhm.
Yes, they
Mhm.
seemed tense. Yes, they seemed unhappy.
Mhm.
Yes, they were clearly having some kind of an argument, but was he shouting at him? No, he was not.
What,
So the
hey,
police were
what are
kind
your
of.
theories, by the way? Because if you're gonna leave, I'm gonna have people going, what the
I,
So
heck are their
so
theories?
so I'll
So
oh,
finish
you're gonna
up
have
let
to
this
me
thing
throw a
take
real
the
couple
quick,
of those
theories.
in
real quick.
before you
So
leave,
so
Linda.
Bob so
Okay?
Bob does go back to the hotel. They have this his phone argument. John Carpenter was apparently allegedly there for it. But at some point in the night, somebody does come in. It is no forced entry. There is, whoever it was somebody that Bob knew very well. They came in. They hit him twice on the head with what police believe is a tripod, because of the way the indentations were made on the head, and
Oh
then
man.
also the way the blood spatter was on the sheets. Um, and they took a black bag. We don't know what was in the black bag, but they took a black bag that some speculate were photographs or videotapes of, women that Bob had taped.
I
And
think he was dead after the first blow, though.
Yes. Oh, yes. He
Yeah.
never knew what hit him. He was sound
Right.
asleep when it happened.
Right.
Bob was a very light sleeper. So the fact that he was sound asleep and had no worries of whoever this was, if somebody had walked in, he
Yeah.
would have heard it. He was also notorious for locking all of his doors. He was very
Here.
meticulous about that. So he fell asleep with somebody in the room that he trusted. Who
Oh,
that person was is anybody's guess. Linda will talk about her theories, which, but what happens next is it happens around 4 o'clock in the morning, Scottsdale time, Arizona time. The next day, he fails to make a lunch appearance. He also fails to meet up with Victoria Berry Wells, who he had promised he was going to help with a casting audition tape. And he misses both of those things. So Victoria Berry Wells goes over to the apartment. The door is unlocked. It's dark inside. She goes in. She sees someone in the bed. She thinks it's a woman
oh,
because of what she thinks is long dark hair, which is really the blood spatter from Bob. And so when she realizes that, she doesn't even realize that it's him at first. She comes out and she says, "There's somebody dead." She calls the police and says, "There is somebody
wow.
dead in Bob's apartment." And then, of course, they find out that it is Bob. It's a horrific, horrific, horrific crime. It is a travesty that it has not been solved. It is, the Scottsdale Police Department did a terrible job. People walked in and out without securing the scene. They had, they left with evidence. They smoked in the apartment.
Oh, jeez.
Today, the FBI and the police departments, when they're training their detectives, they use Bob Crane's case as what not to do because it
Wow.
was so badly bungled.
And
And
it was like
it's
satanic too, right? I mean, they had used
no,
like
well, there
and I
there were things
No, well,
written
there
on
were
the
things
road,
on the
on the
wall, but
wall. Yeah, but
yeah,
it wasn't satanic in nature. It was more,
personal.
the
personal.
gruesomeness of this was it was very personal. If you are going to kill somebody and get that close to that person
Ah,
and then do other things and
well,
hang
stick
out
around
there.
after you've done it, and then
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
they wrote on the
Um,
walls with the blood, and it
I
It,
mean,
sounded
it
it's
splattered
bad.
up on the ceiling and
Yeah,
everything, but
come
but
on,
they took the time to do some things to that room after he passed.
come
Yes.
on.
So,
Yeah.
and
So
to
what
his
are the?
body, which is just creepy. So, I'm going to give you my theories because I'm late.
Yes,
Well, they're not my theories; they're the theories. There are,
sure.
I mean,
In the book, yeah.
there are seven of them. The first one, of course, was that it was John Carpenter. He was with Bob. He was someone who obviously started to have some disagreement with Bob. And, the whole if I can't have you, no one can. If we can't do this, no one will, no one will kind of thing. That's one of the theories that's out there. John Carpenter was tried. He was acquitted. And until the day he died, said that he had nothing to do with it. So take that as you will. The
Wow.
police said, this is it, we're done. We have the right person, or they believed they had the right person, and that was the end, as far as they were concerned. Um, and remembering, just as a side fact, that Carpenter was not brought up on charges until the 90s, because the trial was happening as OJ was driving down the freeway. So it was quite some time before any charges were brought there. But that was, of course, the first, and that was the one they focused on, and that is actually the one that they kind of just honed in on to the exclusion of anything else that could have happened, which is why, as Carol said, the crime scene was such an absolute
Oh my gosh.
disaster area. I mean, there's video. I did a show called Autopsy, The
Autopsy.
Last Hours of, and in that show, you will actually see some video of the crime scene and the medical examiner is climbing all over the body. It's ridiculous. Why would you
Oh
do
my
that?
God.
Why would you do that? So
Unbelievable.
we'll just leave that aside for
Yeah.
now, but there you go. So there's that. I mean, there is the idea that it could have potentially been Victoria Berry was an actress who was playing the smaller role in the show. Bob treated her like a daughter. She is one of the women that Bob did approach at one stage and say, "Hey, we're doing this. Are you interested?" She said, "No, thank you." And so after that, he became like a father figure to her, and she got
Mhm.
sick, and he'd bring her medicine, and he'd bring her chicken soup, and then he'd leave her alone. But there was the argument that potentially it was her husband, Ellen Wells, who was unhappy about it. There is the theory that it was the mob. Scottsdale was a mob town. Bob did say to Victoria that
Interesting.
he mentioned to her more than once, this is a mob town. And um,
Hmm.
Johnny and Pam Thompson said he was not afraid to go there, but he didn't want to go there. He wanted them to come. And they could not get out of their contract and they could not go. But there was something about Scottsdale that made Bob nervous. It seemed to indicate that that was because of the mob. Why he would be afraid of the mob specifically is uncertain, although the idea would, of course, be maybe it had to do with a woman. But there's no answer to that, so no one knows. There is a theory being floated by certain members of Bob's family that Patty, his second wife, was connected to the murder. The police have said that it could not have been her. It could not have been a woman that inflicted the kind of damage that was inflicted
Wow.
on Bob. They were in the process of reconciling. Could she have had someone else do it? Well, maybe, but why would you do that over
Yeah.
there?
Yeah.
So I mean, I discount many of these theories anyway, but that one, I
Yeah.
think
That's
that's
a
a
really
personal
far out
grudge,
one.
and I stay away from it.
Yeah.
Um, I say that seems to be a very personal grudge. So
Yeah.
an angry boyfriend, an angry husband, that of course is always out in the mix.
Kind of
Uh,
easily. I mean, that
yeah,
has some
yeah,
legs. Yeah.
yeah. And there's also the theory that his son Bobby is connected to his murder, his oldest son. That is connected to the idea that there are some things he has said that do not wash with reality in terms of what happened where, but those are particular memories that just may be mixed up. I did this, I have that. Maybe he just forgot. There's a lot that's going on at that
Yeah.
point. He was
Yeah.
supposed to see his son. He did at that stage. He did not. But and another one could be that it was, a replaced actor who wanted a grudge. Had a
Wow.
grudge. So,
Wow.
it's important to say
That's a
here.
lot.
I'm running late myself, but I'm still going to
Sure.
say this. We don't actually know why Bob was murdered.
Yeah.
We know it was personal because it doesn't get much more personal than what it was. But we don't actually know. So everybody assumes that it's because he was involved with a woman.
Right.
I mean, his lifestyle would indicate that there is a great potential for that.
Mhm.
But nobody actually knows.
Right.
Nobody has ever come and said, this is why I have done this. There were no notes, there were no clues, there were, there's nothing. There's no actual real understanding. Police have come up with motive after motive, or the motive, which was John Carpenter didn't want to be left out of the picture. That's the only motive they ever came up with. But, aside from the idea that Alan Wells would have been unhappy about him approaching Victoria, who was also a lovely lady, by the way, absolutely beautiful. However, they don't, there is no known dyed in the wool, absolutely rock solid motive. There are different reasons that it could have happened. Women are certainly one of those big reasons that it could have happened.
That amount of women. Yeah.
But do we know why? No. Did he just ping someone off unintentionally? Did he, get on the wrong side of did someone get up on the wrong side of the bed and blame something on him? Was he going to find out something that
How'd they get in the room? How did they even get in the room?
Well, they didn't break in.
I know. That's the weird part about this.
And Bob was a notoriously light sleeper.
Gosh,
so whoever did this was somebody that if he walked in, if he was in that, so that person was either in the room when he went to bed, as in the condo when he went to bed, or was somebody that he was very comfortable being around. He was not drugged. So there's no indication that, there was no substance in his system aside, I think, from an antihistamine. And because Bob did not drink and he didn't do drugs. Bob did not drink and did not do drugs. So it just wasn't who he was. So he was either very comfortable with that person, or that if he woke up and knew they were there, he just went back to sleep, or they were already there. But do we actually have a motive? No, we don't know.
And when people say,
we can think all we like, but we don't know.
When people say it's, it's because he slept with all these women. He was a disgusting creep pervert, name calling.
I don't actually think it's, I don't actually agree with that theory. I have my own theory. Carol and I, of course, have our own theories. We don't talk about them publicly because it's not our job to tell people about the murder. It's our job to tell people about Bob's life, and this is what happened. But we don't. We have a theory about who did this, but we don't discuss that with other people because it's not fair.
And if what we think might be wrong, and so we're no better than the people that
nobody knows. Nobody ever knows
unless somebody makes a deathbed confession. If they haven't already passed away, unless someone makes a deathbed confession, this will remain an unsolved crime, which is very sad for his family and his friends and everyone who loved him, because it was particularly heinous, I think, and it was very cruel. I mean, if there can be a non-cruel way to die, to murder someone, but this was a very personal and cruel murder. And so it would be fair, I would think, to say that whoever did that probably isn't going around murdering anyone else.
Yeah,
it was personal.
Exactly. Yeah.
It was personal. And on that note, I have to go. So.
All right, Linda, thank you so much. I appreciate you. Carol, I'll talk to you.
You're very welcome.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah.
I'm happy to return any other time. Oftentimes people do more than once with us. So if Carol, if you guys do want to, please add me in. Otherwise, thank you from Australia, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you, John. It's been lovely.
It's been a blast. And I love Aussie, by the way. So,
Yay.
All right.
Bye.
I'll see
you.
Bye,
Linda.
See ya.
So, Carol, one thing that I do want to kind of end on a little bit is
Sure.
the Donna Reed Association.
Hmm.
Couple of things. One, I know that he was on Donna Reed, I said, for 2 years. Huge break for him. It
Yep.
really put him on the map.
Yep.
Um, there's a side where Donna Reed herself is a big part of Bob's life.
Yes.
And
Yes.
then there's the other one. I've interviewed Paul Peterson, who I know you have
Okay.
also interviewed, and
Sure.
I
Yep.
know Paul. And he did mention Bob in the interview, and
Uh-huh.
he said actually that Bob his impression was not so great, that he felt that Bob did have kind of a womanizer vibe. It kind of gave him
He,
the creeps.
right. So,
And
so
so tell me what your take is on both of
So
those.
I got a couple things. I love Paul Peterson.
Yeah, I do too.
I met,
He's a
you know,
good human being.
he
He's done a
really,
lot of
really
good.
is. He's done so much good for the kids, for the
Yep.
adults who were child actors. You know, he's tried so hard and dedicated his life to doing such wonderful work.
A
And
minor
he should be,
consideration because his
yes,
work is phenomenal.
absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. So when we talked with Paul, he did not like Bob because of the experiences he had on the Donna Reed show, and they were his experiences.
that's right.
Um,
Yeah.
so and that he is absolutely, that is who, he is, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to
Well,
keep a
show
land
us the
shark from,
dog if you can.
come here, River, come on up
I
here.
mean,
Look, he's
my
still
audience
he's
loves dogs, so let's
come on,
see, let's
come
take a
here.
look and let's see what this
Right
dog
now
looks like.
he's being a land shark, so
Yeah, of
he's
course. Now
being
it's like I can't. I
right, right,
cannot.
right,
I will not
right.
go on camera. Um,
Come here, you.
yeah, it's interesting
So
though because I believe, and I might be wrong in this, but I believe there was a younger actress. I don't know if it was Shelley. I can't remember, but
Shelley Fabrice. Well,
yeah, and
he had,
I'm
here,
not
here he
sure.
is. This is the land shark that
Oh
has
my
been
gosh.
disrupting our
I
interview
knew. I
today.
knew. Well, well, look
So,
at well, there's a lot of love there. But I will
so
say that Paul did that was very he was very
yes,
specific that
yes.
Bob was coming on to like this younger
So
girl, and that was a bit of a
Bob,
turnoff for him.
so I'm not going to discount Paul's experiences.
Sure,
He's,
sure.
those are his. I was not there. I don't know
Yeah,
how
yeah,
Bob
yeah.
behaved. What I do know is that Bob was very touch and feely. Okay. He
Yeah.
was a hugger. He was somebody who was going to come up and, just automatically be very animated, very physically. We all have those kinds of people in our
Oh,
lives.
sure, sure.
And, they might not know their their bubble, you might say.
Right. I
Um,
totally get it.
so Paul had very good things to say about Bob as a radio host.
Yeah.
Um, he thought if he had stayed in radio, he could have gone far, and he's right. He could have,
And he already
because
did go really far. I mean,
he
come on, he
did.
was like
He could have
the
gone
guy
even
in
he could have
LA.
gone even farther.
Yeah.
Um, Donna Reed, Paul. So it's funny because when I met Dawn Wells at the Mid-Atlantic Nostalgia Convention
Uh-huh.
several years ago, before COVID,
Yeah.
and Paul had happened to be at that same convention too. And I went up to say hi to Paul, and he said hi, and he was very nice. But he was just basically like, I'm not gonna, I don't want a copy of your book, basically.
Right. Yeah,
And that
he's
was
not a
fine.
fan. Yeah.
No, he's not a fan.
Yeah.
And what I can say about it is, I mentioned it to Dawn Wells. And Dawn's response, because I gave Dawn a copy of the book. Dawn had known Bob, and after Bob had died, Dawn was actually part of a bit of a Hollywood movement to try and get actors better security on the road when they were traveling to the different
Oh,
theaters,
how interesting.
because it was horrific. It was horrific. The
Yeah,
actors, Hollywood is a small community.
it
We
is.
think of Hollywood as being this big, huge, thing, and it's really not. It's very tight. It's very
It is.
small. And
Yeah.
so when Bob Crane gets murdered,
Yep.
the actors back home, they got scared. It was like, okay,
Well, sure.
what's happening here? We need better security for when we travel and go on the road.
Yeah.
And so I talked to Dawn a little bit, and I happened to tell her a little bit about Paul because he had been there.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
The exhibit hall had closed, the vendor hall had closed, and we were just talking, and Paul had already left the vendor hall, and we were just talking, and I happened to say, about Paul, and she says, he was a kid. He was a kid. So when you're a kid, and I'm not discounting his
No, not at
experiences
all. You're going
at
to have a
all.
different
But
perception now.
your perspective is a little different. So what may have looked to Paul as that's too touchy-feely, he's crossing
Sure.
the line. And let's remember too, Paul is very protective. He's
Yeah.
protective by nature, or he wouldn't be doing the fantastic work that he's been
Oh,
doing his whole
definitely.
life.
Definitely.
So that's ingrained in him from long before he even knows Bob Crane on the show.
Right.
He has got a protective nature. So what was most likely innocent maybe came across as something that Paul just didn't like because that's how he is
Sure.
wired.
Sure. It definitely could have gone
And
that
I
way.
don't
Yeah.
know because I don't, but
Yeah.
that's what I'm taking from that.
Yeah.
What I can tell you is that Anne McCrae, we didn't talk to Anne, but in reading Donna Reed's biography,
Yeah.
and she was interviewed for her biography, she had nothing but good things to say about Bob Crane. There was no hitting on her by Bob. There was, just
He looked up to
professionalism.
her. I mean, he was
Um,
checking in with her constantly about how he was doing and as an
sorry,
actor.
sorry,
Okay.
I've got the land shark.
I
He is
always
going
I
crazy.
I always say this, but it's true. Life happens. It's okay. No problem.
River,
I
River.
don't mind that if River wants to stay there while you talk, doesn't bother me. What?
So,
Yeah.
so the other thing too is that Donna loved Bob. She loved him.
Yeah.
When Hogan's Heroes got picked up, she and her husband,
Tony.
Tony Owen, sent Bob a telegram saying, "Our loss is America's gain."
Hmm.
You know, Bob was young back then, when he was on the Donna Reed show, and when I say young, he was early 30s,
Yeah.
that's young to me now.
Right. Yeah.
um he is still figuring things out. But he's also got this glib radio personality that is very very animus, very, very
Hmm.
animated. It's he's over the top, and that
Right.
over the top rubs some people the wrong way, and
Oh, sure.
and that's okay. Um, when when I when I said to Paul at the convention when I saw him, I said, Bob was trying to change. He said, I don't care about that.
Right.
And I thought that was a little harsh because,
Yeah.
everybody deserves a chance to
Yep.
better their lives. And Bob
Yeah.
was trying to do that.
Yeah.
But, Paul's entitled to his
I
memories.
got it. But
He's
I will
entitled
say
to
that
his, yes.
Donna had, as you said, not only had a different angle, but
Mhm.
the fact that Bob was calling Donna
Yes.
after performances and
Yeah.
saying, "Okay, what did you think? What did you think of my performance?
Yes.
In this
She was
episode?"
mentoring him. Absolutely
Yeah,
true.
that's pretty
She was the
tight.
one that got him to go to the acting course by Stella Adler.
Right.
And he's doing all of these things at Donna's, you know, guidance, you might say.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he's definitely Donna loved Bob. And as much as she, as much as she could as an actress plus a producer at that
She
time,
had a
because
lot of
those
effect
almost
on him. Yeah.
she did have a huge effect. Yeah, and he would call her during Hogan's Heroes and say, "What did you think? What did you think of that episode? What do you think I should have done different? Should I have done
Mhm.
anything different?" So yeah, that there's two sides to that story.
It is.
Yeah.
I know. It's just
Mhm.
so interesting. I thought that was wild. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I guess we can end on that one. I just want everyone that makes it this far into the interview, uh,
We do
to know.
talk a lot.
Yeah, I love talking though.
Sure.
But Bob Crane, the definitive biography. Once again, it's a larger book, but
Mhm.
I mean that in the sense that everything is covered, and
Mhm.
both of these women did a fantastic job on it. So, yeah, I really appreciate it, and I hope
Thank
if
you
they
so much.
you got it,
Yeah.
Carol. And you worked 12 years on this thing. Where can my audience find it, by
Sure.
the way?
Sure. We have a website where we have, links to the book. We also have links to our YouTube channel where you can go and listen to some of Bob's air checks. The website is vote, the number 4, bobcrane.org. So it's voteforbobcrane.org. The reason behind that is we've been trying to have Bob inducted into the National Radio Hall of Fame. And so there's like a voting campaign. And so back in 2011, when we launched the site, this is, that's what made sense back then. And that's what we have now.
Great.
So
vote for bobcrane.com.
.org. .org. Voteforbobcrane.org. Yep.
And is
Yep.
for vote for Bob. Okay, great.
Yeah,
Okay.
vote for the number 4, bobcrane.org.
Okay, all right. And otherwise, where else could they find your book?
Amazon, Barnes and Noble, the publisher, our publisher, AM Inc. Publishing. Really, anywhere books are sold, you can ask for it to be ordered. I see it pop up on eBay. It's pretty much everywhere. It is 10 years old now,
Yeah.
but we're still talking about Bob. Bob still has a story to tell. For us, it wasn't just a celebrity biography.
I don't think
It
so.
was
Nobody
something.
spends 12 years on a book.
No, it
doing that,
became very much a project that we became very passionate about. We became friends with the people that Bob had in his life, his family, his friends, his coworkers, and they mean a lot to us. So it became very personal to us in that we are not part of his story, but we're part of their story by the fact that we were doing this for Bob.
Sure,
And they are so appreciative, and that makes us very humbled. We are very humbled in the work that we have done to tell Bob's true story. Nobody is perfect.
Yeah.
Every single person is just a human being with good and bad.
Yep.
And Bob was primarily good. He happened to have a human weakness that got him caught up in and unfortunately, led to bad decisions that ultimately led to his demise, an early
His death.
demise.
Yeah. Well, listen, thanks a bunch. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. And I'll be in touch when I release this.
Okay.
But
Thank you so much.
it's been fun the
This
whole
little guy.
time. Even with the dog, it's been fun. So no problem.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
River making his appearance, his debut.
That's right. All right.
Thank
Take
you
care.
so much,
I'll be in
John.
touch.
You take care. Have a good one.
Thanks.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye. Hope you enjoyed the interview. Please don't forget to hit the subscription button and also hit the notification bell right after that so that you get notified whenever I have a new episode. And be sure to check out some of my other interviews. Henry Winkler, Jerry Mathers, Angela Cartwright, Shelley Fabre. It goes on and on. They're so great. Enjoy.